Jody, what happened with the power outage?
What's that?
What happened with the power outage? Do we know?
Which one? The Slinger lens or this
The high
one?
school.
Just the wind. I heard.
Oh, really?
I heard it just knocked down trees on the
Oh,
power
okay.
lines.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a transformer fire.
Oh, right.
That's what I heard.
It seemed, when I got the announcements, like the schools specifically have lost power.
It's just in this area. But a lot of these times. I did. I'm right.
Live mic. Holly?
I'm good to go. Okay, thank you. Somebody's talking to me. All right. You all set, Willow? Good. All right. If we could reconvene our meeting to open session, the board has been in executive session since 6:30 to discuss a personnel matter. We could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Robert Tejan.
Ewan McKnight?
Willow Bear.
Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbach.
Mary Flannery.
Catherine Nadeau.
John Walston.
John McPhillips.
I don't think this is the case, but just in case, do we have any PIG students here tonight? Okay, I didn't think so, but, oh, we did have one. Oh, okay. So your obligation is to stay until 9 o'clock or the meeting is over, whichever one comes first. And just before you leave, make sure you sign out. There's a sign out sheet up here at the table. That way you get credit for being here. First on our agenda is it's some time for discussion this evening that I know everybody wanted to have about the lab school program. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the committee. And Catherine has volunteered to serve as the board representative on the committee.
Yes.
So I just wanted to officially appoint her as the board rep.
Do we need a motion for this?
We don't need a motion. It's something I can appoint her, but I'm just making sure there are no objections from anybody. And otherwise, thank you very much, Catherine, for volunteering
Thank you.
and being willing to give your time. And then, Jody, I was hoping that you might be able to speak a little bit about sort of how the committee is going to be put together and kind of how it's going to work.
So for any committee, typically I send a note to the bargaining unit, so the BCTA, as well as the BAA for representation. So there'll be some teachers that are selected by the BCTA, counselors, supervisors, all are members of the BAA who will serve on the committee, a middle school rep administrator and a high school administrator will also serve on the committee. Then I reached out to Dave Lendrum about getting parent reps and a student rep. And then from there, if we determine that we need some follow-up or additional people to serve on that committee, obviously as we get going. Sometimes in the past when we had our committee, we would typically meet and there would be some follow-up, or people would go back and get feedback from their respective groups and then bring it back to the committee. So we don't have all the names yet, but I would expect in the next couple of weeks we should have all the representatives formed. Yep.
And now, I mean, obviously, Catherine, you can report back to the board after there's,
Absolutely.
with updates about things that are happening. I don't know if you have another sort of an idea in mind of how we can do that as
Right.
well.
So obviously Catherine being the board rep can provide the board with regular updates after we meet, but just from our past committee process, there would be times where there are certain things that the committee would discuss, we would gather feedback, and then we would think, kind of plan, this is a change moving forward. So there would be reporting back to the board at that time just to provide them with updates. Sometimes they were presentations, sometimes they were just done through the superintendent's report. So I would expect that would continue as such. If there's anything that would, for example, go to curriculum council in between any final processes, then obviously that would be done and there'd be information shared with the board as well. So we don't really have, I guess, we didn't have a strict time frame on when those updates would be, because in part it was when are people available to meet, what kind of feedback is gathered, then what do you do with that feedback. So, but I would say there was feedback probably every 2 to 3 months on the process.
Does anyone have questions? Bob?
Yeah, I think you talked about this before in terms of the overall time frame. Can you touch on that again? And then, like, sort of, and maybe this is what you just talked about, but the meeting schedules, and obviously I don't mean dates, but
Right.
like the frequency that the committee's gonna get together, and any kind of output that you might have in terms of reporting
Yeah.
or written reports or
Yeah.
anything like that.
So what we did last time, which was helpful, is kind of at the beginning of the process, we identified what are some of the challenges that we're facing, what's some of the information that we needed to gather, and we kept almost a kind of running agenda and running minutes of that information that then could be shared. Obviously, how often the committee meets is going to be somewhat dependent upon people's availability. I mean, obviously, it's after school, the committee would be meeting. Summertime is pretty tough to try and get people together, although I think last time we were able to get maybe one meeting in the summer. So most of the work would happen during the school year. And again, some of it's going to be dependent upon how easy it is to gather some of the feedback that's needed, and then share that out. But I think that process at least worked for kind of keeping track of what the priorities were, where are we going with some of the recommendations, what are curriculum changes that will be recommended, what would then go to the board. There was one point, there was a presentation that was, here's some of the decisions the committee has made to this date, and here's some of the lingering concepts that still the committee is working through. But the timeframe was, we anticipate by fall of '25, hopefully, that there would be some recommendations that would be more formalized as to what a cohort model might look like moving forward. That's the plan right now.
And then Jody, that would go to curriculum council and then come back to us as part of the curricular amendments for,
Correct.
so if we're looking, so if everything happens on that schedule, then we're looking at revised cohort model for fall of '26.
26, correct.
Did you have a question?
One of the concerns that's been brought up is that if this committee is made up of people who are kind of hostile to this cohort model or program, then it's not going to be very effective. So how can we ensure that members of the committee have experience with the lab school, know what they're talking about, and are supportive of this program in whatever shape it takes forward?
So obviously, we have to rely on these are volunteer, right, people on the committee. So the last time we had a committee, I thought that the members who were on that were there were some former lab school teachers, there were teachers outside of lab school, and some teachers within lab school that seemed to work well, because obviously one of the things I think that we need to keep in mind that with potentially looking at a different cohort model, you want some fresh ideas, but you also want people who have some experience working in a cohort model as well. So I think a combination of that. I don't see anyone actually joining the committee just to be hostile. At least I've not had that experience with any other committees that we've had in the district. Everyone generally gets on a committee because they're supportive of it and they believe in it and they want to put the time into it. I think both with the BAA and the BCTA, they'll look for a combination of people who are veterans and perhaps some newer staff. So I think that's always a good combination to have on any committee.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Something that just occurred to me is that I've been in the district while we've had a couple of different committees. I haven't personally been involved in them, so I don't quite know how this works. What types of resources, if you will, are typically available to a committee if a committee says, oh, we'd like to gather information to answer this question, and we would have to go outside of the committee to pull that information together. What type of support or resources or those types of things are typically at a committee's disposal?
I mean, it's generally not that difficult to gather feedback. If you're looking for feedback from teachers, that's pretty easy to get, and staff. The parent group, I know when Jeff served on it, is the parent rep before. He would go back to the parent group to gather feedback. I don't know if he ever did it, back then we didn't have Google Forms, which makes it a lot easier to gather it. I think a lot of that was through conversations, and then would bring that back to the committee, who usually try and summarize that. With students, we have the ability to use Google Forms, which is pretty easy to gather as well. Trying to go out and get some information perhaps from alumni might be a little more challenging, but I know our communications department could help with that. So I don't see that as a real obstacle to gather information.
And Catherine, if your question was less about like anecdotal information, if it's, when I served on the Start School Late Committee as the board rep,
Yeah.
we would say, what would be really helpful is we knew how many bus routes there were.
Right.
And through
Yes.
Jody, she would go back to transportation or whatever, pull the data and bring it back to the committee, so.
Oh, got it.
Right.
That's useful. I was thinking both that type of information, but then also if we were getting down the road and we've got something that's starting to gel and say, oh, like, could we talk to students to see, does this
Yeah.
strike a chord? Like, could something go
I
out to
think, yeah, I think
existing
that would
students?
be, absolutely, I think that would be very important.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions about Ewan?
I know, the committee's being charged to specifically focus on this cohort model. Are there any other constraints? Are they being told, great, the whole world is open to you, do the best we possibly can?
I think it should be open to any new ideas people have. There's no constraints, except if we're looking to maintain a cohort model, that's kind of what our parameters are.
Yeah, that-
Outside from that,
Super.
I think it's open.
One more.
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, that's sure.
You talked about the composition of the board. I mean, how many people is that? Do you see, like, is that?
On the committee
Yeah,
itself?
like, how many, like?
Probably, 10, 12, maybe a little more. Sometimes, if you're working on something specific, let's say, like, for example, you're looking at scheduling, you might bring in one of the administrators from the high school to really talk a little bit more about logistics of scheduling or something like that. But generally, I would say probably a dozen. And obviously, people can't make every meeting, but it seems to be, that's probably where it will land, somewhere around there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Check them one more time.
I mean, other comments, but not on this.
No,
right?
okay.
Yeah.
The next thing I have on my list to raise is I know Meredith had asked some questions at a prior meeting with respect to some of the enrollment numbers. And Jody, I think you had pulled some information together to share, so
Mhm.
I think I'm going to do that now.
Yeah.
Brittany, can you bring?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, Meredith had asked to gather information on, we had talked about the loss of interest and the concern about students leaving lab school. So it was a great question.
Is it possible to make it bigger at all for people?
You're fine with like only seeing certain numbers.
I see, okay.
So it's, I certainly can, know it will,
No, nothing's cut off, actually, that's fine.
well.
Oh, I see.
So it doesn't show all the years.
Right.
So this chart, actually Dave first put it together, but essentially has the graduation year for all of from 2011. We don't have data prior to that wasn't just paper copies, because that's when we moved over to Aspen. The number of students who actually applied in grade 8, what the total 8th grade enrollment was, and Meredith had asked about what percentage of kids actually applied from the class, how many ended up enrolling, and then how many finished all 4 years. Keep in mind that even though the numbers are, for example, in the first one, 29 enrolled in 2011 and 13 finished, with an attrition rate, 16 students dropped out, that could reflect one or two students, or students dropping, that one or two students could have also joined, but these are just numbers not associated to individual students. So you can see that over the course of time, the percentage of students applying to lab school has dropped significantly, and we've had some significant attrition in the program. So if you add, average that all out, it's roughly a little over 30% of kids have left the program who begin in the program
That's the average over,
over the 2011 to 2027. And obviously 2020, these out years at the bottom here, they haven't graduated yet, so we don't have that information. These are just kids who've left since they started. The reason those numbers are in pink, and we just put 30, is because since about 2018, there have not been more than 30 kids who actually applied to lab school. So the lab school teachers actually didn't track it. They just accepted all the students, or would have accepted all the students who actually applied. So we just put in 30 there as a placeholder, that there were not more than 30 students who actually applied during any of those years. So you can see, the number of students who were interested and the number of students leaving reflect some of the concerns that we've been talking about within the program. Okay. I don't know if anyone has specific questions about that.
Do you have questions?
Willow?
Just about the way that this is structured. So for it says graduation year, not year, right?
Right,
So
that's the year
So
that-
the 2027, the last line, so this is this year's
Right. They haven't
ninth
graduated yet.
grader?
That's this year's.
That's just year's
ninth
ninth graders.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
All right, so this year's ninth graders would have been, I'm
Ninth-
just trying to figure out where COVID happened with the lower numbers. So COVID would have been
23 to 22, right?
Right.
21.
here,
Yeah.
just to,
Well, so it would be the graduating year of 2024
Right.
would be the first ones that were
Right.
admitted post-COVID.
Right.
okay, so
correct.
there's 3 years of decline.
Right, since then.
Before COVID.
Before COVID, correct,
Okay, all right.
correct.
and so when we're looking at this, just to make sure that I'm reading the table correctly, when we say graduation year 2011, so we're talking about the application is when those kids who graduated in 2011 were in eighth grade themselves. It was,
52 kids.
thank you, 52 kids who
Right.
enrolled at,
So-
who were applied at that time.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's interesting if you look at the actual enrolled numbers. So, class, 2015, right? You've got 117 applicants enrolling 30, then you enroll 28, 27. But then we're still enrolling 24 and 25 in some of these years where you had fewer than 30 applicants. It seems like at that point, everyone who said, hey, I'm interested, actually did enough enrollment.
So in speaking with some of the lab school teachers, one of the things with the presentations that they changed to home base versus the large assembly, they would go down and actually meet with the kids in home base about the program. They felt like that provided an opportunity to actually answer more questions than they could in a large assembly format. So, for example, when you're in a large assembly format of 300 or 400 kids, you don't have an opportunity really to ask questions. But if you're in a home base of 20 kids, you're more likely to ask questions. So they felt like more of the students who actually were applying were more interested in the program than maybe when, you have 170 or so who are applying. It could have been because they thought, oh, this sounds cool, or oh, I want to go to Florida, which is when they used to go to Florida. And they could have just said, I'm going to throw my name in there in case, because I'm not sure. So,
And did
I mean,
that,
that's just in discussions with the
Sure.
teachers that maybe that's why.
and that switch started with the class of 2021?
I think I don't know when I thought they started going to the home bases in 19, but then COVID hit, so I can't remember. Some of those were doing via Zoom. So I don't know exactly the year that changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what we can't tell from this, and this may not have been what you were saying, if I'm understanding correctly, like class of 21, we had 18 students enroll. We know that no more than 30 applied.
Correct.
It could have been, however, that 22 applied and 18 chose to stay with it, right?
Right, so that was my point, that these later years, the percentage of kids that express interest and, apply and
Right,
then
we don't
actually
know
end
what
up
that-
enrolling is much higher than it was in the, if you look at the 89 kids expressed interest, but only 26 actually enrolled.
I see.
There's a much bigger drop-off
I see.
than there has been recently.
Thank you.
But they only took 29, right? What was the max enrollment?
30.
30.
Right, that was what I found interesting. In all of those years, they still didn't enroll 30 kids.
Well, it could have been that when after, so for example, if you take 2016, there were 70 kids who applied.
Yep.
28 enrolled.
Yep.
Half of those students, once they had to make a decision when they're looking at what's the scheduling, what priorities, they could have said, thanks, but I'm not going to select lab school.
No, I get
Right.
there's
Yeah.
been attrition drop-off.
Yeah.
It's just that difference in attrition drop-off from
Yeah.
application to enrollment is
Yeah.
quite striking.
Correct.
So I'll follow up on that, just so I understand. So you've got the columns, you've got graduation year and then application. One is, I'd like to know a little bit more about what application means. Is that just an expression of general interest, or like, do you have to actually have to go through an
Well-
application process? And then I'll just, then two, to get from that number to the actual enrollment, what's that process? And can you tell from this chart if any students were actually left out? In other words, you look at 52 and 29, does that mean that the difference between them, and I'm not going to do the math quickly,
Yeah.
does that mean that many kids wanted to be in but weren't able to be in, or does it mean something else?
So once the students apply to be in lab school, historically, when there were more than 30 applicants, they would apply to lab school, and then there was what was called a lottery process, and so students were selected from a lottery. So, for example, if you take the first one, 52 and 29 enrolled, there could have been 30 who got in, let's say, in the spring, and by September, one of them decided not to do that, which could have resulted in 29. There could have been 25 initially who were in, and there could have been students waiting to get in, and a few kids dropped out, and so come the fall, it ultimately was up at 29. I mean, I don't really, depending on each year, it was very
Sure.
different.
So in other words, even like looking at the year 2014 where we had 71 and 28, anything lower than 30 means that everybody who wanted to be in got in? Is that?
Not
No.
necessarily, because originally there's a lottery, they said, congratulations, you're in lab school. Some of you are on wait lists, they refer to them as wait lists. Some kids ultimately said, well, I'm not really interested in lab school anymore. Some kids, it didn't work out because of the schedule, and then some kids stayed on the wait list, and then come 10th grade, maybe there was an opening, but at that point, kids are already in a high school and they're in a program, and they'd say, thanks, but no thanks.
But it also doesn't mean that number, the differential, were excluded?
No,
Okay.
no, no.
We just don't know?
We don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Jody, I did just want to thank you for putting together this data set, because I do think that this gives us more information than just simply the numbers within the classroom every year. Because, when we're just talking about the difference between 24 kids in a class versus 22 kids, it's not that much of a difference. But I do think that these numbers do give us a little more information about the interest within a particular class year, and I think that's also why it's important that we have the interest as a percentage of the 8th grade class, because we all see that, between these years, we've lost 100 kids. So it's difficult to compare those numbers. So the percentage is important, and it gives us a little more information. I do see why it's very important to have high interest numbers based on the fact that no matter what, even when, we're talking so much about recent scheduling issues, but obviously there have been scheduling issues prior to this. But even when there is a question of whether or not the scheduling was not as intrusive as it is currently, we still have people who are leaving the program or deciding it's not working for them. So I just wanted to thank you for this data. It does lay out a more clear picture for me.
And Brittany, would you mind just scrolling down so as we continue to have this conversation, we can also see the,
We're at the, oh, no, we're not.
No, we're not.
Right.
yeah, just to have that up for a little bit too. Thank you.
I think,
Thank you.
I think it's really interesting to see, between the 2020 and 2021 class, right, there's a break. And from 2021 on, it's been flat or increasing slightly. I really, what happened for that graduating class? Because they were making decisions way pre-COVID, right? And you've got this sudden drop-off from 15, 13, 14, 8. And then it's creeping back up a little, but it's basically flat or, you know.
From what year?
So you look at 2020, graduating class 2020,
Yeah.
and graduating class 2021. That's where the jump happens. And I'm, why?
So that was 2016
Yeah.
to 2017.
So is that the consequence of the previous review? Because that would be weird.
That would have been before that. And you
Well-
still have, if you look at 2020, you're talking about 57 kids who applied, right? 28 enrolled.
If you look at the percentages, right? So
Yeah.
percentage of the 8th grade
But I
class.
mean, you have 14 kids who left the program that year, 50%.
Well, I think what
Is that
Ewan
weird?
is talking about is the change from the 57 kids applying in 2020, for the class of 2020, so we'll
Right.
say.
14.5% of that class.
We'll say in
Right.
2016.
Yep.
And then the next year in 2017.
It's 8.3%, right?
It drops to below 30 very quickly.
Right.
Essentially, did something happen in 2016?
Right. Was that when the previous review was? Was that
It
Well,
was
the review is 2014.
Yeah.
Right. We actually added the research class into the program as a credit-bearing class. Can't remember if that was 15 or 16.
Okay.
And I think that's something the committee can look at,
I was gonna say,
Right.
yeah.
Use this to,
I was just
to
gonna say
drill
that.
down into what
Right.
changes have occurred.
Right.
Yep, I was gonna say the same thing.
Did anybody else have questions about this topic?
My question is related. So it's not all COVID, but it overlaps with COVID. And I think my question is whether we saw drops in other programs, because I recall hearing in the music presentation that we also had far less kids in band and orchestra, and there was like that sort of bubble, and we had far less kids in some of our sports for, like, we're just now, I think, filling out our athletics teams, and there was sort of a bubble where there weren't a lot of students signing up for various things, so I just,
Well,
my
mu-
brain is trying to overlap the years in a way that,
Well, music, obviously, for a lot of reasons, kids
Sure.
couldn't actually sing and play instruments during COVID, so they absolutely saw a decline. With sports, we saw a little bit of a decline, not much. Actually, our sports.
now they're huge.
Yeah, we have huge numbers, is what Len shared. Definitely the music numbers have rebounded since then, but for a while, when those kids were not able to participate, we remember them standing how far apart and in parking lots and things. It wasn't the most attractive classes. But those numbers seem to be rebounding, percentage-wise compared to what our student population is.
So you don't think there's a reason to think that COVID impacted the numbers in these years?
Maybe it impacted it, but the continuation of it, I think there's probably more to discuss than just that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else on this topic? The next topic that I have on my list ties in with the action item that we have later on our agenda this evening. But first, I just wanted to acknowledge that, I know we've been, a lot of the public conversation has been about enrollment numbers in the lab school. And I did want to acknowledge that the board is aware of information with respect to the program that cannot be shared publicly because it is confidential. So there is that element, and I just wanted to, acknowledge that. And I also wanted to start this conversation by recognizing that, for me, and I think for most of us, that yes, lab school has been a valuable program in the district, and that we want to see a cohort model in whatever shape that takes place succeed. I know for myself, I spent many years serving as an examiner in the lab school and reading the papers and listening to research presentations. And being part of that process. But I think because of that, I want to make sure that the committee that we're putting together really has a chance to really look at what's working and what's not, and to have the room to make any creative changes that they need to. And so because of that, I do have concerns about steaming ahead with, enrolling a new freshman class, because I think in the past we have tried to, we've tried to reevaluate and rework the program while it's in process, and it hasn't worked. I think in 2014, there was the committee that looked at it. There was a program review that occurred in 2020, 2021, and a few changes were made. And then even this past summer, my understanding is that the district gave faculty summer curriculum time to look at the program and to suggest changes. And we are, it feels like we are still, we're kind of trying to stick Band-Aids on, instead of taking the time to really look at the program and figure out where we're at. And, so, that's just sort of, I have many other things I can say, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I just wanted to kind of open it with that thought. And I'm not sure who would like to share additional thoughts. I don't want to have a monologue over here.
I can
So-
go first.
Go ahead, John.
So yeah, I think one thing I think Jen Spila really brought out last meeting about talking about special ed and least restrictive environment, and I think something to look at that does seem like it's a bit of a restrictive environment given the numbers and the size. I think if we're trying to move in that direction, it's certainly something to consider how we can reimagine that and get that more up to something where it'd be more in line with the models that we're trying to use within our school, the other areas. I also think that, 8th grade is such a difficult time. You're coming into high school, and I think to enroll 8th graders in something that they don't know what it is, they don't have necessarily the stability, there's not a clear plan. I think to have them go into high school is something that doesn't have clear structure, expectation, situation for what it's going to be, and they have them start with something and have that be something significantly different, that may not be great for them. I just think, our kids are already anxious enough and have enough things to deal with. I think having their school structure that should have some stability, I just don't think it makes sense to bring them into that environment as they're starting their high school career, when we're supposed to try to get them on a path to success. And I think we receive very many emails of people, oh, my child's anxious, my child's anxious, my child's anxious, and I think to create that situation for kids who are anxious, I just don't think is a sensible path forward.
Happy to go if you want. No,
Chime
by
in.
the way. Few points, I guess. There was one point of information. We had several questions and comments about whose role is it. I actually called NISBA because I figured it was easiest people. And so the New York State School Board Association said, yeah, this is definitely a board thing. You guys should be making this decision. Doesn't surprise me. I just thought it was nice to get that feedback. So we've definitely heard, from Jody, from Dave Ramsden's support, significant weight of expertise and seniority, frankly, in terms of what's happening with the lab school previously, suggesting to put it on pause. I don't want to undervalue that at all. We had a presentation with some data. We have another one here, right? It's pretty clear that over the past, at minimum 6 years, there's no decline in enrollment. There's, if anything, a slight upward trend. Interest hasn't decreased. If you do the math, I just did it in my calculator, there's an 18% increase in the enrollment percentage, right, from 2021 class, 2026 class. But there's not an enrollment argument that would support cutting the program. We just heard there may be other factors that play into it. I like basing decisions on data, right? So we're being asked to make a pretty significant decision with no data, at least that we can talk about, that we support that. The data we have don't support enrollment decline. And against those voices, we've heard from, I don't know, 100 or so, lots of people in email, in public comment, current parents, current students, all alumni. What struck me from all of that was I was waiting to hear from the folks who didn't like it, right? If there's a lab school program that has so many challenges and isn't offering what folks are hoping for or being good for their kids, I would have expected to hear from them. And whether in private or in public, I've talked to current students, I've talked to lab school teachers, I haven't been able to find a single one. And that really just struck me as surprising if the program was at the state where it needed to be put on pause. I also don't want to do a monologue, right? So I'm happy to come back and have other people chime in, or I'm happy to keep talking either way.
I will respond to that statement just by saying I have heard a diversity of opinions
Good.
from
Okay.
people. And I think sometimes, when there sometimes are a variety of reasons why people don't speak up publicly.
Yeah.
And I also, I do want to clarify that for myself, that pausing the program and not enrolling an 8th grade class to me, that doesn't mean the end of the program. It means literally a pause in order to have an opportunity to make real change that would provide long-term solutions instead of just short-term fixes. And, it does seem, to me, it seems like it would be, and I say this also as a parent of an 8th grader, that it would be unfair to have them or ask them to come into a program when we don't know what it's going to look like. We just went through a whole conversation about our 9th graders. And, that made a lot of sense to me that, we had a 9th grade class that we enrolled, and that it was going to be really hard for them to move out of the lab school program and transition into something else. And so it made a lot of sense to me to continue with the 9th graders in the lab school. But I think so then it doesn't make sense to me to bring in 8th graders that then could be in the same position. Because if it's hard for the current 9th graders, it would be hard for whatever class is following to be in the same position. And I think, one of the things that struck me when I was, looking into a lot of this is that, originally that lab school, I think the very first class was just 10th and 11th graders, but that originally it was just 10th through 12th graders. And that was okay. So, I don't know, just a thought.
So I actually feed into some of my other thoughts, right? I do program review of educational programs a bunch. We do it all the time. We just went through having a neuroscience minor whole curriculum revision. We didn't stop people from enrolling in the neuroscience minor or tell people already in it, hey, those of you in the first year have to not do this for a while, because we thought it was a valuable program, and it was, we want to encourage as many people as possible to take advantage of it. So we improved it. We added classes. We did a bunch of changes where we thought the focus should be. But no program review ever would, we wouldn't consider stopping offering English or math, right? To say, hey, we think we can do better. We'd still continue to offer the best we have currently, and work to improve it while we're, if I were a current 8th grader and I was being told, we all agree that a cohort model is really great and we need to offer it, just not for you. I feel undervalued, right? I feel like I was being told, we're sorry, but we need to stop doing this for a while so we can do it again in a bit. And for me, like, that all feels like the wrong way to do it. I don't think you can, no matter how big the changes are you want to make, I don't think you need to put the program on pause to do it.
Can I say something else?
Yes, okay.
I think conversely, look at it from like a sales situation, right? You have a product that doesn't sell. You don't keep trying to just slap lipstick on the product and try to keep selling it. You take a look, you take a pause, you look at what works, you do some studies, you get some stuff together, and you go like that. So I think you're kind of comparing apples to oranges, because at a collegiate level versus a, middle school, high school level, I think it's two different things. I think you look at it from two different perspectives of, again, you're trying to sell something to someone that doesn't have the interest. So how can we evaluate it and then try to bring more interest into it? So it's a product that you have that cohort that you're trying to get together and you can create a path forward.
Oh, I definitely agree, we need to ask the 8th graders, you know, would you like to enroll? I think that's clear, we need to get those data about, is there interest? You know, if you're given an assembly or whatever, so that everyone knows what are the data, I absolutely agree. But I guess if in sales model, if I'm Volkswagen, I don't stop selling the current model of Golf while I'm developing the next model, right? I keep offering that for sale.
But if people are buying it, sure. But if people aren't buying it, then it doesn't really make sense. So again, you gotta look at your numbers, which I think these numbers were very helpful for us to see today.
And regardless of the interest, it's whether the product is appropriate if we're going to continue with the
Right.
analogy. You know, my understanding, and again, we're sort of hampered because we're getting, you know, there's information that we're privy to that you know, isn't able to be shared. And my understanding from the folks on the ground, the professionals, is that the pause is warranted in order to create a program that's appropriate for all the students. And continuing to offer a program that maybe some feel isn't appropriate, you know, while they try to make it appropriate, I think is, regardless of the numbers and regardless of how much interest there is, you know, I think that's something that we can't ignore.
I think that's a great argument. I think if we thought the program was that bad, and we should just say, okay, we're cutting lab school, everyone has to leave. But I don't think anyone thinks that's the right thing to do. But I think that's a great point,
But,
yes.
but we've heard that people think that, right? So I struggle because I love the lab school model. I was excited for my kids who aren't at the age yet to enroll to have that opportunity. I, as a member of the board, am like a broken record for our more marginalized students who need different types of models to support them in different types of ways. Lab school feeds right into that for me. I've loved it since I joined the board. And I agree that ultimately, and that we've gone back and forth, that the board has the authority to make the decision to forever shut a program down. But we don't do that as experts. We do that as a board based on recommendations from experts, right? And we've had recommendations from experts that a pause, not a closure, is the best thing to do at the moment. And I'm still very much stuck between these two positions, I'll just admit out loud, due in large part to things we can't talk about, that a lot of those recommendations seem to be based on. Can I ask a question though before? You seem that you're not moved by the data that was put up there?
Oh,
and you
I'm
think
moved.
that it does not show a decline?
Right.
Can you help me?
Yeah, look
I
at.
mean, I can't do basic math, so I really need you to help
So-
me understand.
So 2021, graduating class 2021, right? You got this big drop to 8.3%. And then it got 8.8, 9, 9.8. There's not a decline over these years, right? So the initial data presentation we were given from the administration said, recent years there's been this horrible decline in student enrollment, and now we're at the point where interest isn't there to motivate this. And it's just not, it's just not
The
true.
decline goes back further.
Well, there's a decline here, and actually it's increasing. We're getting increasing interest in the past 5 years.
Well, we don't actually have any numbers, though, for class of 2021 through 2025. Those aren't real numbers. The 30 is not a real number.
No,
No, it's
It's
Very
a
well.
below
But
30.
If you look at the enrollment numbers and do the same math calculation, you actually get a more dramatic result. The same
Explain to
direction.
me what you mean there.
If you take the notes, so right, we don't know those 30s are real.
Right.
We do know that the enrolled numbers.
Column
are-
E here.
The
Oh,
18, 24, 19, 17, 25.
So if you look at the class of 2025, the class, now you've got 25 students enrolled out of a total class of 332, as opposed to 2013, you've got 25 students enrolled out of a total class of 456.
I understand what you're saying.
It's actually a much bigger number.
Yeah, but what's that, it's a 12, I mean, you also have to look, I think, at the percentages are fine, I suppose, but the real numbers of the graduation I mean, so the 4 years now are 13, 12, there's an anomaly at 21 and 10. And the question is whether that, you know, that's sort of going back to whether that's sort of an appropriate program.
I agree, that's the question.
Yeah.
And you look at the 4 years before that, right? 14, 11, 19, 8.
And then it's, you have to go back, you know, then you've got, you know, the numbers like 20, 26, 25, 22.
Right, we had a comment in the public session that the class of 2026 is probably the most, if you had to pick 1 year as a recent number, right? It wasn't COVID, it didn't have this most recent year's real scheduling issues. Yeah, I think it's hard to work out what the real, if you like, 8th grade interest would be. And I really think we need to go ask them to find that out.
Catherine?
So one of the things, so I've been sitting with, as we all have, I've been sitting with this conversation, I've been listening, I've been talking with folks in the community, talking with fellow board members, talking with anybody I can talk to about all of this, frankly. Just trying to wrap my head around what we're hearing. And what I've started to realize is as I'm balancing this, there's different types of expertise in the conversation, and there's different types of expertise in the room, right? We have our administrators, the teachers union, the teachers, who have day-to-day expertise in program development, in program implementation, and what's happening, what they see in the classroom. And then we have families and current students with lived experience that is just as valuable. It's a different kind of expertise, and it speaks to what this program is providing, the level of joy, engagement, love, and community that has been expressed to us is wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful. That's what I hope we would foster in the district, throughout the district, and that level of passion that we've seen demonstrated here. And so as I've been trying to work this out in my head and trying to figure out, like, well, how do we move forward? It's with those families' direct expertise that I can say with absolute certainty, thank you. And it was I think really the right decision to continue to keep the 9th grade in the lab school. And I'm really grateful that the administration and folks really listened and took that to heart and put that into action, and I appreciate that. And then hearing from the administration, which does not speak in a vacuum, is not separate from what's happening in the school, and is directly connected to those teachers and to the guidance counselors and to the program implementers that are saying that the program that we currently have is not the one that we need going into the future, that we have serious problems and serious challenges to address. That leads me to really think about the need for a pause, because that's a level of expertise that we rely on every day throughout the school, is this type of program development and this type of program implementation. And so I don't know where that lands. I just wanted to share that, both as a way of saying, you know, thank you to everybody who's been part of this conversation, and as a way of saying, like, as we move forward from wherever the board as an entity ultimately lands, I think it's crucial that we bring all of those different types of expertise into the committee and into the program development for what comes next. Because one of the things that I've heard clearly is that Bethlehem needs to continue to have something like the lab school, and that is incredibly important to all the stakeholders involved. So,
I just want to underline that what you said there, that, you know, when Jody has brought this to us, that, you know, I think it's not a decision that you made lightly, and as you said, not in a vacuum, that you were hearing from the teachers and the supervisors and, you know, the people in the building. And it reminded me of, I did go and read the lab school book, and, you know, that Jim Nearing wrote. And one of the comments that is in the book is that, you know, the people who work directly with the students generally have the best instinct for what is working and what works. And that spoke to me with respect to, you know, your comment about the expertise of the people that are in the building every day. And, you know, yeah, so it's just, I know other people have more thoughts, but.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, and I also read the book, so thank you for whoever made the recommendation. But I also just want to add, as I do every time I go to my son's CSE meeting, right? His special educator is an expert in what he or she does, but I am an expert in my son as his parent, right? And that experience and that opinion is relevant as well and is important to the conversation. So I look forward to the work of the committee and the parent reps and student reps on that committee, and I hope that we will be open-minded in terms of taking that feedback as sort of an equal member of that committee makeup for that reason.
Meredith, you have some thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you to Catherine for voicing some really powerful thoughts there. I think you just showed why I think you'll do a great job on the committee, because this is a nuanced conversation, and it is so important, as Willa was saying, that families and students have a large voice on the future of this program. I do think it's important for us to listen to the community input. I really appreciate everything that we've heard and the emails we've received. I also understand from our experts that this program does need real change. And I believe the committee can come up with some innovative changes to reinvigorate this program. As a board member, I think it's really important that I say that I have full support of this program and all the ideas behind it, the cohort-based model, the project-based learning, the research and internships, and the oral presentations. I mean, we've even seen examples of it from our students and alumni. I've been so impressed by their presentations at our meetings. But I also trust the administration when they say they need a break in order to do the work. The administration listened to members of the community, and they listened to the board when we spoke about our concerns about the ninth graders and the fact that we do not want to take them out of this program. I think it's important that the administration listened to that and made a change to their recommendations. So I believe, you know, we trusted them with that. They listened to us and made a change, and I think that's important to acknowledge. With trust also comes accountability, and I think that we've, you know, established that with the committee and established that we expect frequent updates, and we're not going to just let this go. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that I've heard from the community, is that a pause means death. And I think it's important to say on the record how much I support a program such as this. It may not look just like this. I understand we need major changes. But I think many of us on this board have voiced tonight how important we think this program is. We want to keep it going. If that requires a major change and it requires a break to do that change, I support the people who are actually doing the work, the program development, the program implementation. They're the ones we're asking to do the work. If they need the time and they need a break in order to do that, I trust that that is coming from a place of good faith, and I'm excited to see what changes are going to come from this, because I think it's a wonderful program, and it can be really something we can, as Jody was saying, we can get so many fresh ideas from this, and I'm excited to see where we're going with it.
Can I just go back, it's actually on the committee piece of it, but if we were to take a pause, we talked about not having committee recommendations implemented until the fall of 2026, so.
2 years.
Like 2 full
Correct.
years. Is,
Well, we haven't started yet.
Right.
So we're already in 2024. So to go into 2024, 25, most likely the recommendations for any changes in program curriculum would go to Curriculum Council that following fall, 25, for implementation for 26.
is
And I
that
don't
how
real-
long we took the last time we did a program review?
We didn't,
We didn't do the full.
well, we did, but there were some changes made. There was a research course that was added. We clarified some of the internship required, but, I mean, it wasn't what I believe needs more significant changes. I think Holly referenced, kind of, there's been more of a Band-Aid approach, and it really needs to be looked at in the entirety. So could it happen sooner? But I think that the timeframe that was outlined is probably the most realistic. And you've got summer, right? I mean, you don't want to like to get the board together, 7 people in the summer. So that's probably the timeframe.
Catherine, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think I just, one thing that I wanted to lift up, going back to my previous statement too, is that like all of these arguments are valid, right? It's incredibly valid to say we could be moving forward while we do a program consideration. It's incredibly valid to say we need a pause so that we can reset a program. They're 2 different approaches. And I think, again, not to harp on the difficulty of the decision, but like that's part of what makes this challenging, is it's like you could make really great conversation, really great decisions in either direction here. And that is in part why I give so much weight and consideration to the people in the classroom doing, and hearing from the people in the classroom doing the work, is because ultimately that's who's going to be carrying out any changes that we're going to ask of them as well. And I don't know how effective it would be if what we're hearing is we're asking for a pause, and if we were to come back and say, nope, we got to keep going while we do this. And there's something about that. I don't think I'm being my most articulate in this moment. I apologize, but there's something there.
I hear what you're saying.
Can I just add
Yeah.
to the rationale? I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One, having been part of the review committee back in 2014, seeing some of the work of the program reviewed in 2020 and some of the work that the teachers in lab school have been trying very hard. And I know that they're disheartened by where we are today. If you look at, part of what was interesting putting this together, data, the number of kids leaving the program is a real problem, right? And if you look in recent years, there's a high number of kids who enter the program and leave the program, aside from the enrollment. And I think it's really unfair to have our staff try to sell a program to the 8th graders that we all can acknowledge is struggling. to say, we're not really sure what the program is going to look like in a few years, and, oh, well, if it's not what you like, you can just go back to the traditional high school, because that's okay, when we've had this extensive conversation about how that was not okay for the current ninth graders. And I think, you're trying to ask 12 and 13-year-olds to make a course selection going into ninth grade in high school, when our counselors, our teachers, our administrators don't know what that program might look like in a couple of years. And we'll be having the same conversation about that group of kids in 2 years when they don't perhaps want to go into whatever that looks like. And I think that is unfair to do to eighth graders.
You want to
response? Yeah. You made a comment about attrition rates. And again, they keep vanishing, but
We
it's
can just
not actually-
ask. Brittany, would you put those back up, please? Thank you.
It's not actually the case, right, that you've got more attrition recently. Running down the numbers, minus 16.
I meant overall, 30% attrition rate is a high rate for kids to leave a program.
And that's the
Oh.
average over all of those years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So not
back
in
as
one
far
year.
as 2011, right, the
Correct.
highest number on that chart, I think, is 2011.
Correct.
It's not something that is new in the past 5 or even 10 years. Sure.
No, it's more significant because you have lower numbers and kids leaving the program. So you end up with very small numbers.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the discussion around 8th grade is great. I really appreciate all the perspectives here. It is definitely the case that, if we offer the 8th graders the chance to enroll, one of the things they need to be, very clear about is it's likely something will be changing in this program, right? It's still going to be a cohort-based model. Core is still going to be the same. We're still going to be trying to make this the best we can. But it's quite possible things will be different to exactly how it looks now. And you should take that into consideration, and your parents should take that into consideration when you decide whether you wish to enroll at that. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I think, if I may,
Yeah.
a different point that I think is worth raising too is that one of the things that we've heard from the community is that we started really broadcasting a program challenge widely, publicly, almost at the end, almost at the same time we were saying, like, this needs to shift dramatically, so dramatically, in fact, that there needs to be a pause. And I think that I've heard, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think I've heard a sense of betrayal in that coming from some of the folks we've heard from in public comment. And so I don't have a solution to that, right? We can't go back and change what has happened, but I do want to say that that's something that I've heard and that we've heard, and I think that's a place that we can also grow in our learning from as we look at different shifts that the district will make in the future. Where can we bring more folks into the conversation earlier? Where can we have an opportunity to engage? How do we create more opportunity to engage earlier in the process? And I don't have the answers to that, and I am not here to blame anybody or point fingers or anything like that.
Acknowledging.
It's acknowledging, and it's saying, like, that's something that I've heard that I want to carry with me out of this, is like, how do we address that, or how do we think about that in the future?
Mhm.
Thank you, acknowledge.
I appreciate that point. Any thoughts? One other thing that I thought of, is that, I think change is always hard. But it also can be really exciting. And kind of to loop back to the conversation we were having about the committee, and I'm looking at you since you're our designee.
What? Yeah.
I am excited for the committee to learn about, what innovations
Yeah.
might be out there. I mean, it has been, it's been over 30 years since, the initial founders went out and they were looking at other programs in other districts and really exploring, techniques and options. And I just hope that's something that, you can kind of carry into the committee, is to encourage, hey, maybe we need to go visit another school, or, gather information from them. And
Yes, probably one in the Virgin Islands.
so,
Like March of next year.
just for fun. Because, things do change.
Absolutely.
But it can be, learning about some of the changes that are out there that we may not even, know about, could be exciting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree
So-
more. And I will take that charge. Thank you.
You prompted a thought, sorry.
What?
And actually it builds on what Willow was saying too. One of the things that the state, and probably the nation, but I know more about the state education, right? They're really trying to support and encourage this kind of cohort-based differential learning opportunities. And so the experience of individual kids, right, of being able to have that option, I think is just so valuable for all the grades, doesn't matter which grade you're in, but to have that option for any given student is just really important.
Any other comments? Did you have anything else? We kind of were taking up
No.
space in all the conversation, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add or
No,
share.
I mean, I agree. I think that, since we've been talking about the committee among staff, I've actually had some community members reach out to me with some interesting ideas that are things that I've not thought of. So, I definitely support a cohort model. I mean, I love the middle school. When I was there years ago, the middle school team approach does a lot for kids. And I do think that there will be a good group of people on the committee who will have some interesting ideas and bring forward some new thoughts and hopefully regenerate the program, right? I mean, that's really the goal, to rejuvenate it. And, I said to someone that the goal would be to come up with a model that kids will be interested in, kids will want to remain in, that can perhaps last another 30 years. Or maybe shorter, but that would be the goal.
Mhm. Anything else anybody wanted to talk about before we move on? Okay. In that case, why don't we move on to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is our recognition of visitors who would like to comment on an agenda item. As a reminder, that the board uses the public comment period as a chance to listen to concerns, but does not debate issues or enter into a question and answer session. And it is also important to remember that no commenter should discuss individual district personnel in their comments. We do encourage anybody who is speaking, or even who is not speaking, to send a written copy of comments to the board, but that is not required. I would just, remind people that we do have a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker. Catherine has agreed tonight to be the timer because it is easier sometimes to divide up these duties. And I did want to acknowledge to everybody that, and in the public, that, we have received all of the comments that have come in. I have tried my best to respond to all of them, but I do apologize if I missed anybody's comment. And there were a lot, and I'm only human, so if I missed it, I apologize. But they did all come in, and please know that all written comments really are considered by the board and are appreciated. So I say that also to the people that I know that sent written comments in advance of the meeting because they were not able to be here tonight. We are limiting our public comment this evening to 60 minutes. I think we will be able to get through everybody that is on the list. I certainly, if we only have a few more people to go at the end, we certainly can have a motion to extend the time. With all of that said, I'm going to go down the list and I will call the first person and then sort of the next person behind them. So if the next person can be prepared to speak, that will expedite things. So first on my list this evening, I have Arthur Siegel. Yes, certainly. Katie Quinn was the next one.
Yes.
And after Katie Quinn, I have Dave Kaup.
Yes, thank you.
So, thank you. We have a parent group that is interested in maintaining lab school. Created a petition, and we have online signatures. As of just a few moments ago, it was 287 online signatures. We have 318 actually in print. I'm sorry, no, we have more than that. The total number, at any rate, is 664 signatures on this petition of folks that are supporters of lab school, would like to see it continue. And so those are copies for you to take a look at. I would also point to comments that were submitted on the online petition, which are at the end of that. We also, the parent group has put together a statement and have signed that with
Thank you.
thoughts and suggestions. I have emailed that to the Board of Education email address as well. So there's a single copy, but you all have electronic copies of this. So you've all heard me speak a lot. I've been at the last 3 board meetings. I'm passionate for lab school, and I would really like to see it continue. And so I'm going to try to keep it to a few comments tonight in reference to the discussion that has just been had. First of all, I would just like to say that this is not sales. I know there was a reference made to, and if it was a sales situation, this is what we would do. We would put the program on pause. This is not sales. This is people. These are kids. We have kids in the audience tonight. We have 8th graders. We have 7th graders who are anxious for a chance to have lab school as an option. Could I have those 8th and 7th and 6th graders just stand up? The parent group has identified between 15 and 18 8th graders through just our sibling and friend network that would be interested in knowing more about lab school. So if we were to take a reasonable metric, the proportional norm of the past of what the 8th grade class is as far as their whole number and then the number that goes into lab school, with a smaller class next year of 280 to 290 students, if we were to take that 5 to 6% proportional norm, the historical average, that would be 14 to 18 students. And we've got them right here. We've identified those. That's without any formal recruitment. The messaging has certainly been mixed. Announcements to the contrary, we've got lab school closing, we've got lab school pausing, we've got it phased out, but yet on January 8th of this year, in the current course catalog.
Thank you.
We have Dave Kaup, followed by Jason McLaughlin.
First, I want to acknowledge all the members of the board for stepping up and choosing to serve on the board and to represent taxpayers and parents. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a big responsibility to establish and oversee policy for our school district. So thank you very much for stepping up to do this. Right now, you're faced with a very important challenge. The board oversees policy, and the administration is hired to implement it. Unfortunately, with this current process related to lab school, the administration chose to announce a pause or a shutdown of lab school without having an open and transparent process that involved parents and the board. This has been extraordinarily difficult for the lab school community. I also appreciate that it must be difficult for the board members, because now you're having to play catch-up in front of a very engaged and irritated group of students and community. However, it's really important to remember that the Board of Education that voted to create this innovative program more than 30 years ago, it was the Board of Education who created it. Despite the difficult position you find yourselves in, it's up to you to make a policy determination as to what should happen now while review of the program is ongoing. You have the opportunity and responsibility to set things right by exercising your policy oversight role to do 4 things. Have lab school remain open and in full operation while the review of the program is ongoing. The enrollment data from the non-outlier years doesn't support a pause in the enrollment right now. Offer 8th graders the opportunity to enroll in lab school and communicate to middle school families that the program will not be paused or closed, but is undergoing a program review. If you pause, you're not going to have a full cohort model for another 6 years. Establish and implement a robust recruitment process that includes an assembly presentation and direct involvement of past and present lab school leaders, parents, students, and teachers. 4th, given prior scheduling issues and the fact that recruitment will occur later than normal this year, you need to ensure that appropriate scheduling supports and processes are in place to support 8th graders who want to join the freshman class this year. Okay, so I understand that there's going to be a board resolution you're going to talk about later that says that the board recommends that the district assess the class of 2020 is interested in enrolling in the lab school program. I'm really hopeful that this is just a placeholder and that the resolution is going to be amended, because this resolution is extremely vague and woefully inadequate to provide any guidance to the administration or anybody who's interested in the program. It does not indicate what an appropriate assessment would entail or how interest in lab school will be manifested. It also doesn't state that interested 8th graders can enroll, but it should. All recent communications from the administration state that they can't participate, and any effort you make to go out and enroll people or ask their interest is going to be super confusing, because they've been hearing over and over again, it's closed. If I'm correct, and a motion is made to modify the resolution with the kind of changes I'm talking about earlier, I encourage another board member to second it so that you can have a meaningful discussion of those issues. One closing statement. Then I implore all board members to have the courage to make things right and pass such a modified resolution to put lab school back on track. You shouldn't have to take these actions because we shouldn't be in this situation, but I implore the board to take its rightful place and exercise its responsibility to be the entity that makes and oversees policy decisions for our community, and make sure that this is done in a transparent and inclusive manner. Thank you.
Jason McLaughlin, followed by Rob Cole.
Thank you. I had a prepared statement. I am not going to read it. It started off with the enrollment numbers. Basic statistics kind of proved that wrong. It was lack of community. And now we're hearing of these major problems within the program that this was news to me. And I'm sure news to a lot of people in here. Why weren't we told about this in the beginning? Is this being the reason for the pause? Why were we told it's lack of enrollment as opposed to we have major problems going on? I understand it could be confidential. That's fine. We're adults. We understand that. You could have said, hey, we have some major problems within the program. We can't go into details due to this, that, or the other thing. But we really need to stop this for a little bit and figure out how to make it better. But instead, it was BS around enrollment numbers, which, come on, this is killing us. You know, we've been working so hard to try to figure out what is really going on here. And you had this stuff a month ago. And now you're telling us that it's major problems within the program that we're hearing about now and we don't even know what it is? Come on, what the heck? This is ridiculous. You know, like, we're adults. Treat us with some respect and talk to us like we're members of this community and we care. We're here all the time at these meetings. And I find this incredibly disrespectful and incredibly inappropriate for the Board of Education. Thank you.
Rob Cole, followed by Scott Garmo.
Yep. Rob Cole, parent of a lab school freshman and a 6th grader in the middle school. I also had prepared statements, but we learned something today. We don't really know what it is, but something. And as Jason just said, we've been trying to figure this out. It doesn't make sense. Our point of view as the parents of the current lab school students is that there's nothing wrong with this program. It's amazing. It's wonderful. The only problem that we could find is that it hasn't been promoted properly. And how do we know that? We know that from our own experiences. My wife and I asked about lab school. We expressed interest about lab school. We scheduled a meeting with our daughter's guidance counselor about lab school. We got one sentence. That's all she would say about it. One sentence. I think Miriam could handle the curriculum of lab school. That is all she would say about it. She didn't tell us how great it was. She didn't tell us even how bad it was. She didn't say anything. So the only problem that we've been able to find, and our story is not unique, is that lab school has not been properly promoted by the people whose responsibility it is to promote it. Our thought was, we just need to simply tell people how great it is. If we could tell people how great it is, then this program would be fine. It wouldn't need to be changed. But now, I feel like a patient that's been lied to by his doctor, like I've had some cancer diagnosis that I haven't been told about. No, there's something wrong with the program. It's really awful. We can't tell you, but we have to, put you on anesthesia. Again, it's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense. And I still remain confident that if we as a collective team, parents, administrators, faculty, guidance counselors, students, alumni, could get out there and tell the 8th graders and the 7th graders behind them how wonderful this program is, we would get the enrollment. There would be nothing wrong with this program. Thank you.
Scott Garno, followed by Lisa LaCour.
My name is Scott Garno. I'm the parent of 2 current lab school students, one a senior and one a 10th grader. And I haven't said this before, I don't think, but a 4th grader who, when he heard lab school was closing, literally burst into tears. Because he hears all the great things from his brother and sister about it, and now realizes that he most likely won't be able to participate in that great program. I was going to talk to you about the less than adequate resolution that is, at least the public resolution that's coming before you tonight, but previous speakers have done that. So what I want to offer is what I hope are some clarifying ideas about 2 major conversations you guys already had. And the first is about a cohort model, because what I'm hearing, at least in the conversation that I'm hearing, maybe there's more to it than what you're saying, but what I'm getting from the board is that a cohort model is, well, it's a 9th grade cohort and a 10th grade cohort and an 11th grade cohort, which is a complete misunderstanding of how lab school works, because the cohort model is 4 grades. 12th graders always have a 9th grade mentor. You don't enroll an 8th grade class, rising 11th graders won't have a class to mentor. Cohort is more important than just 1 or 2 classes. It's not independent of itself. The other clarification I want to offer is the idea that it's was unfair for the 9th graders, but it would be equally unfair for any classes that are going up. There's one massive difference. The 9th graders, you were kicking out of the program. Any people that would be coming into the program as 8th graders or 7th graders now, in 2 years, they'd have a choice whether the program that's being offered after the review is a program they want to stay in, not saying you're not welcome here anymore. That's not how a school should work. I appreciate that the administration has changed that, but what we're asking for, it's completely different from my perspective. Thank you for your time.
And after Lisa, Dennis Whitford.
All right, good evening. I also had other things I was going to say, but I think Ewan made the point that I was going to make, reminding people that it really is the obligation of the board to make a decision about the future of lab school, including continuing lab school. You know, the board is the policymaker, and the policy is supposed to go in the direction of the administration. It's supposed to direct the administration. The administration is supposed to go and execute policy. This is like basic civics. You guys are elected. We have an executive. We have, you know, the board is supposed to be checks and balances. That's the, you know, process we all learned in 4th grade about civics. So there's a lot of deference, and I guess I would say, how come we don't have any deference for the kids that are in the program and their parents who are having a fantastic experience? Like, it seems like that doesn't count at all. And tonight, you know, as other people have mentioned, we're hearing more things, secret things that we don't know about, other problems with the program. They're so bad that we can't even continue while the committee explores ways to address them. We can't even continue. It's so bad, we can't even bring in another class. That just doesn't hold any water. And that's why it's hard to imagine that after this committee process, we're going to decide, oh yeah, lab school was great. After all, the cohort model was great. We're just going to continue on with a 6-year break when we don't really have a cohort model in the program. You know, the reason that we feel skeptical is because we've been offered nothing but skepticism, the reasons to feel skeptical and the way we have been treated. So I'm sorry, I would love to live in a world where we could have good faith. And I really would have thought, and what I was going to say was, if you guys have this small ball you know, resolution, you guys should just express your support for lab school and tell the administration you want to continue it while we undergo a review. And the administration should take that in good faith. And they should go out, and you shouldn't have to tell them, oh, you have to have a, you know, robust recruiting. You should be able to tell them the policy, and you should be able to expect your administration to execute it. And we shouldn't have to be like, you know, in here negotiating over what a robust, you know, process would look like. We're in this world because we had the cart before the horse. We had an announcement without any investigation, and now we're trying to back it up with some data, and the data is different every week. And then we come in here today and we find out, oh, it's not about the enrollment data at all. It's about some secret problems with lab school, even though our students and parents are finding lab school is a fantastic thing for our kids. Maybe we're just deluded. Maybe we're just insane. You know, what's wrong with lab school? I mean, you can't tell us? Do you not know? Are we going to find out in the committee process? Doesn't it seem a little odd that we're going to end the program before we find out what's wrong with the program? And the other thing I want to point, it just seems like some board members don't know much about the program. There was a suggestion earlier that this is a special ed program and we have to deal with. I'm just going to finish the point. This is a very academically rigorous program. Do a little homework, people.
Dennis, followed by Pam and Sarah Marie White.
I'm going to be sticking to my prepared remarks. My name is Dennis Whitford. I'm the parent of a lab school sophomore and what would hopefully be a lab school 8th grader. We joined lab school due to the unique educational opportunities it offered our oldest son. It was a standing joke in his middle school that his teachers and other staff at the middle school couldn't tell him apart from one of his classmates. I took it hearing that these statements from the staff that my son did not stand out in the crowd at Bethlehem. He got good grades, he behaved in class, was polite and kind to his peers. He was not the squeaky wheel that needed the grease nor the academic wonderkin that garners much attention from teachers. We knew something had to set him apart from his peers to better his academic success. Lab school provided that for my son. But what is more important now is the community that it provides for him. Lab school provides a place for people to be different. In recent news, we see clearly what happens to kids who are considered different or weird. The universal truth is we are all different, And in lab school, differences are celebrated. And in those differences, a community is formed. This is an organic process supported by teachers and the community and cannot be measured or falsely created. Kids that identify differently or learn differently or perceive the world differently and perceive their place in it differently can thrive in this community, not despite of their differences, but because of them. This is powerful and worth supporting. When lab school students' days are done, they will not remember the sign out front of the building. They won't remember that the grass didn't turn brown. They will remember their friends, their people, and the experience that they had. They will remember the community, and that is why the lab school community is worth fighting for. If you ask who this decision to pause lab school affects, it affects my sons negatively. It takes away from my oldest son's chosen family and takes the opportunity to be a part of that community away from my youngest. Without a continued freshman class, the community does not grow. Lab school parents will fight this pause from happening. This pause will harm the entire lab school community and prevent a future cohort of students benefiting from the countless enriching experiences during their high school career. Please consider this. Please consider this unmeasurable. Thank you.
After Pam and Sarah Maria, Christine Beck.
Hi, I'm Pam White. I graduated last year and I was in lab school for 3 years of my time in high school. I left for my senior year. And I just want to take a moment to discuss the importance of the freshman class in lab school to the upperclassmen, right? Just very briefly. For one, you don't have a freshman class, then you don't have the senior buddies, the senior research buddies. I know that I never got to be a senior buddy, but editing sophomore papers in my junior year really helped me apply what I was learning in my research classes and notice the mistakes that I was making in my own writing, right? With smaller class numbers, we also have less support already with our audiences. We fill our audiences for our midterm presentations with the freshmen and the juniors and the seniors if we're talking about sophomore presentations, right? If you don't have a freshman class, that's less support for the students who are getting up there and being so brave and presenting in front of this board of people, some of whom they don't know, for a grade, and that's really stressful. We need to keep those freshmen there, right? If you're gonna let the current freshman class continue, if you're gonna let lab school continue while we make this big committee decision, you need to keep those freshman classes coming in. It's not the lab school that the current students signed up for if you don't do that. That's my part. She's more important.
Hi, I'm Sarah Marie White. I'm her younger sister as well as a current student in this year's 8th grade class, otherwise known as the incoming freshman class. I was also in 4th grade when the pandemic hit, and I was there as a group of dedicated teachers and staff, much like those fighting for the lab school today, formed into the Virtual Learning Academy to provide necessary instructions for kids, all while learning the ropes of virtual learning themselves and making a profound impact on their students, much like the lab school has done for theirs, as shown by the alumni of years past that have shown up at these board meetings. But what I really want to point out is just how resilient and capable my class is. We're not perfect by any means, but that's no reason to overlook us. After all, we were the ones dealing with the shutdown in virtual learning in 2020. We were the ones who went into our middle school years without being able to see each other smile. And we were the ones who, despite all of that, managed to form life-changing connections with our peers and educators, all while making a profound difference not only on our community, but on our society as a whole with the quiet confidence of our voices. And now that we're in our last year of middle school, it's really not fair to assume that we couldn't handle being in the lab school just because the program may change around us. I think I've shown fairly well that we can deal with whatever changes the district or the world throws our way. So it's not right to deny the 8th grade the information on the lab school. It is not right to allow us not to join. And it's certainly not right to take us for something we're not. We deserve a chance to learn about the lab school, and we deserve a chance to grow as the program grows with us.
Thank you.
Christine, and then followed by Joe Munch.
Okay. This board has a tremendous opportunity to remediate and be accountable for the lack of oversight and adverse decisions that has had unintended consequences for this program, including the ones that you can't talk about. but I know what they are. Transparency, honesty, compassion, owning your mistakes goes a long way with building trust in this community, and that includes parents, students, teachers, everybody. I don't feel a lot of trust right at the moment when the buzzwords are going around on the board. Let's pause, expertise, deferring to the teachers. When there are 4 teachers that are still in this district, 2 coordinators and 2 teachers who were in that program for a long time. And I can ask Dave, and I can ask Jody, and I can ask the board, have any one of you talked to them in 10 years? And I know the answer to that too, so you don't have to answer it. So I'm not having a lot of trust here. And by the way, I respect you, John, but when your car dealership is losing money, you bring in the buyers and you increase profitability.
That's what the call is, that's fine.
I'm going to read you some things from the 2014-2016 committee. The same issues that were there then are still here now. So why do I feel like this committee is not going to mean anything? Does the district value this program enough to commit to the program and how we can quantify or qualify? Well, when you're talking about a program review, you're talking about a curriculum review, which is very different. We knew what the issues were. We didn't address them. By the way, Ewan, 2014 and 15 was when they took language out, French and Spanish, and 6 teachers left the program. Reputational damage that was not fixed, was not addressed by the administration, and this is where we are today. So if you want to know why that's the numbers, that's why the numbers are there. Scheduling between Lab School and BCHS creates animosity when Lab School classes with small numbers run and BCH classes with the same numbers do not run. Again, I would say that's probably the same problem with various stakeholders in the district. It hasn't changed, and there is an issue with lower enrollment coming into the high school. Look into that. Lab School is a misunderstood program. It would be good to provide clarification and build into the process what we can do to keep it clear and understood moving forward. Don't think we've done that. Have accurate information and marketing correctly will also help to get to the right students into the program, which will allow for a more sustainable program. We haven't done that. Sending a flyer in the mail in a day and age when everybody throws everything out and everything is deleted, there needs to be more effort than that. The lack of notification and discussion, like real discussion, where people can ask questions and get answers and understand the history of Lab School before it's shut, is not appropriate in this situation with a 20-some-year-plus program that had long years of success. And that's all I have to say. This board can make a difference. Yes, we all want to support the superintendent. I love the superintendent, but this is a choice that you all have to make, and I don't think you're making the right one. Thank you.
And after Joe, I think it's Charles Pagel.
My prepared remarks don't hold a candle to what's been said before me, so I'd like to echo all of that. Dear members of the Bethlehem Central Board of Education, thank you for holding this special meeting regarding Lab School. My daughter is a current sophomore in the Lab School. My son is a current 8th grader in a private school and will be attending BCHS this fall. He was not able to attend tonight's meeting. I want to share on his behalf that he was looking forward to being part of Lab School and would enroll for the 24-25 school year if given the chance. Lab School is the only program of its kind in the area and provides a holistic and project-based educational experience. This is the very type of educational model that is being recognized by the Board of Regents and NYSET as better supporting students' natural curiosity and authentic education. We could not be happier with our daughter's experience so far in the Lab School. She's benefited tremendously from the small school within a school community, close student-teacher relationships, learning how to write a thesis paper, presenting her findings to a panel that includes community members, participating in community service, educational field trips, press clubs, to name just a small fraction of what the Lab School offers. In light of the importance of not losing the momentum of the existing Lab School program, I ask that this board ensure the Lab School is allowed to recruit a new freshman class for 2024-25 school year and continue in its current form with sufficient support and resources while this review committee meets. Thank you.
After Charles, I have
Charles
Heather,
Pagel.
Heather White.
Thank you for letting us address you. The level of new things that need to be reviewed for the middle school, lab school, I'm sorry, is an appropriate thing to be doing. But in the review of problems that are being addressed now, new problems, it creates a distrust among the parents in the community. And then we hear that you want to stop the program for the 8th graders. I think continuing the program with the 8th graders while you address a new model, especially since it won't become available to those students for at least 2.5 years. These students, as you can hear from the testimony from the parents and students, in which I'm very impressed by that young lady, it's fantastic. Some districts have problems, and that's why they're eliminating programs. You have a great program that maybe may need some tune-up, I don't know. But please don't eliminate it. Continue with the 8th graders. Thank you.
After Heather, I have Lily Werner.
I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated to follow my kids. Good evening. My name is Heather White. I'm a parent of a current 8th grader, who you just heard from, and also a 2023 graduate, who was in the lab school for 3 years. It was incredibly disappointing to hear the announcement that the lab school was being suspended due to declining interest. My first thought was that no one asked my 8th grader if she was interested in lab school for next year. I have, over the last month, had many conversations about the lab school with a range of people, including a few of you. I've talked to many 8th grade parents since this began, and they tend to fall into 4 camps. Camp 1, parents who ask if I know when the lab school presentation is going to happen. They've heard of lab school, and they know that historically there's an information assembly about lab school. They're confused why the high school scheduling already happened without ever getting informed about the lab school, and they did not see the email announcing the changes to the lab school. Camp 2, parents who heard the district was closing lab school and don't realize there's an effort to fight to keep it open. Camp 3, parents who know nothing about lab school. Camp 4, parents who think they know what it is and they're not interested, and that's okay. What has become clear in all of my conversations is that there was no transparency on the part of the district to notify the 8th grade parents that the option of lab school was in peril. The assumption was that the single all-district email was enough, and that no communication with the 8th grade class directly affected by this decision was necessary. The ownership of finding out that lab school was pausing and would not be available to 8th graders should not have fallen on those students and parents, especially since the lab school is still clearly listed and described on pages 41 to 46 of the 2024-2025 BCHS curriculum guide. The clear disregard for 8th graders and their families feels surreptitious and disingenuous at a minimum. It lends to a distrust of the administration and its practices, and I've worked with so many of you, and I really, really respect so many of you. I'm asking you to please take a step back and do 2 things. 1, keep the program running while evaluating what changes may be needed, including recruiting an incoming 9th grade class. And 2, properly assess interest. Communicate with 8th grade families. Tell them you want to give them an opportunity to learn what lab school really is and can be. Provide information sessions and the mailings they deserve. Give the 8th graders an opportunity to enroll in lab school as it stands now. Tell them you're taking a year to really evaluate the program, see where improvements need to be made, and that the results could be that they can both experience the historic lab school model and can be part of the change and growth. Talk to the 8th grade families and listen to what their response is. Because of the way this has been put into play, most 8th grade parents are not seeking out their guidance counselors, so that's not a fair or accurate way to assess interest. If after you've made a fair, concerted, and mindful attempt to assess this interest and allow freshman class to roll, it turns out that you're right and there just isn't enough interest, then everyone can move on. But right now, it just feels like things are being pushed through without taking time to deeply and earnestly investigate. You are all exceptionally well-educated, well-thought-out people. There's no doubt in my mind that you can figure out a way to make this work. And I think you will find that the 8th grade families are interested and willing to roll up our sleeves and work with you. Come talk to us and find out. Thank you for your time.
After, I have Lily Werner and then Kimberly Werner.
Hi, I am a lab school alumni, actually. And hold on 1 second. All these speeches, they got me nervous. Oh my goodness. But, so I just wanted to speak on my experience and what I went into high school thinking and what lab school really gave me. Because lab school itself was something that I only experienced the second year that I was in high school. Just as anybody who was transitioning from middle school to high school, obviously, there's anxiety, you're nervous, everything is terrifying. And going into high school through the guise of not being in lab school ended up being all of those, and something that did not help me as a student. I can say very confidently, as someone who was always at the back of the class, or someone who could have been always perceived as different, I never really got the education or the community that I needed until I was in lab school. Lab school was the start of everything that I could have ever needed out of high school. And to be honest, I don't really know if I'd be here without it. It gave me not only the friends that I have to this very day, who support me through everything, it gave me the want to move forward, the love of not only learning, but the teachers that gave me that love as well. And I don't know, seeing high school without it seems like you're denying so many of those back of the class students so much more than they could be given. And I suppose all I can say about lab school in the end is that high school itself may not be for everyone, but lab school is for anyone.
Kimberly Werner, and then Gloria Van Dyne.
I didn't realize I was speaking. My daughter Lily signed me up when I wasn't here, but that's okay. Lily, I could not be more proud of you and your statement. And what I do want to say is I have 2 children who had severe anxiety. So when the board members were talking about, 8th graders have anxiety and we can't put them into a classroom like this, but they don't know what's going to be going on, I can't imagine a better environment for a kid who is scared, anxious, they're artistic, they are not different. I used to joke with people that none of my kids took an AP class. And if the realtors found out before we bought our house that none of my kids were going to take anything with an AP, that they wouldn't let us buy a house in this district. You know? And so not everyone is achieving at that level in terms of academics, that the academic classroom works for them. With the anxiety, with depression, with kids who are creative, people who are different thinkers, neither of my kids would have gotten through school if this experience wasn't there. My oldest was in lab school, and my youngest, I say, is lab school adjacent, because the people that she is still close with, who she's 21, she graduated 4 years ago, are the rest of the kids from my oldest's lab school class. And so not only with our family was it my oldest cohort who are still their closest friends, but it's my younger one who became as close with the rest of that cohort. And again, they're the only ones that they're connecting with 4 or 5 years later. It's that kind of community that it builds. So I can't imagine with anxiety increasing, with depression increasing, with pressure on kids, there are groups who absolutely need this as a model for them to be able to succeed in school. So thanks.
After Gloria, I have Lisa McCarthy.
Hi, I'm Gloria Van Dyne. I am the parent of a 2022 graduate. He had a miserable time in middle school, had anxiety, and he told us, I didn't know anything about lab school, and he told us, I want to go to lab school. I had heard that lab school, I heard a lot of messages that lab school wasn't that great, that it was for underachievers. And I wasn't sure about this. And we went to an information session and decided that it sounded good. My son was so thrilled with lab school that in ninth grade, while playing online games, he's telling everyone how frigging awesome all of his instructors are and how much he respects them and how incredible they are. What ninth grader does that?
Thank you
A
very much.
lab
for
school
sharing your
ninth
comments.
grader does that.
Thank you.
After Lisa, I have Paul Bassenson.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Lisa McCarthy. I'm the parent of sophomore Miles McCarthy. Per the New York State Attorneys Association, the Board of Education in most districts has control over the educational affairs of the district and may exercise a high degree of discretion in how the district fulfills state requirements. It goes on, the superintendent of schools for each school district has the duty to submit recommendations to the school board on decisions involving key areas, including curriculum. As a school board, please remember that a significant portion of your job is to hold the administration accountable. We've learned tonight of a non-transparent issue that cannot be discussed, but administration now uses as the primary reason to close lab school. Why has this come up now? Is it because the original rationale of low enrollment has been found to be exaggerated? We all know a pause in reconfiguration means the essence of lab school will die. It will be gone. Since 2014, administration has been trying to close lab school and take its essence. Now she is nearly there. Board members, tonight, be brave. Second the motion to save lab school. No pause. Please make this right. And in the future, I propose the motion to relieve our current administrator. Thank you.
After Paul, I have Brody Cairns.
Can everyone hear me? Awesome, great. On this, the day of a defining vote, I, a proud 2005 Lab School alumnus, stand before you all today to reiterate my support for this wonderful program. Standing shoulder to shoulder with my Lab School siblings, all of whom have put forth their support as well, I firmly believe it is best that Lab School stay a Bethlehem institution, shining bright for all the world to see. As it has in the past, it must grow to meet the current and future needs of the school district student body and ever evolve to meet the challenges of our times. On this, the eve of the anniversary of the town's incorporation, I must remind the board that the eyes of history are upon you this night. The reach across the decades, the hopes and dreams of tremendously talented educators, and the never-ending narrative of Bethlehem natives have come to a head this night. Being a member of the general public, I cannot vote in this effort, but I shall stand up and speak out as my inherent right as a citizen of this town. Whatever the outcome of this vote may be tonight, I am fortunate to have had a full high school experience, lush with those who care deeply about their students, their job, and their school district. I wish this upon many more Bethlehem Central High School graduating classes, and shall forever cherish my experience as a lifetime member of this wonderful Lab School family. Though having thus far missed out on a post-high school educational experience similar to Lab School, I can rest well knowing that there are superstar educators out there much like the ones I was privileged to have, and I shall invoke their names in tribute. Mrs. King, Mr. Smith, Mr. Irons, Ms. Hines, Mr. Konis, Mr. Kostakis, Mr. O'Reilly, Mr. Friss, Ms. St. Pierre, Mr. Fairbank, Mrs. Pettiani, Ms. Cunningham, Mr. Deeroff, Mr. Cancio, and numerous others. Dr. Jim Nearing, your extraordinary vision for a little town has planted the seeds for decades and has grown into an empire rivaled by no other. It has put Bethlehem on the map, given a big name to a small town, and seen countless eagles leave the nests to soar mightily with the wind. Thank you for your efforts. We owe you a debt we can never fully repay. In closing, to these educators and this wonderful program, seizing the spotlight in this very moment, the only possible way I can think to best show my gratitude to a keystone in my educational career is to say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain."
So we're gonna pause for just, we're not even gonna take a break, we're just gonna pause for one quick second so that our PIG student can leave. You're welcome to stay longer if you want. But thank you for coming. And while they're signing out, Gloria, I'm advised by our timekeeper that I think you got cut off prematurely due to a phone error. So if you would like to
No, I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
So we would love to invite you back up to continue your remarks.
Don't lose any of my time.
Gloria, I apologize and thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to go back to, I hadn't heard what my son had heard about lab school. And so I think that even if there are brochures and other things that are done, you can technically be doing the work, but not really be behind it. And I think that that could, and I don't mean you, but in general. Anyway, back to my son who was anxious and has anxiety and had an internship, an engineering internship before he went to college. In fact, he had 2 internships because of his internship in lab school turned into a paid engineering internship. As a freshman, he was courted by numerous companies because of his rapport and his public speaking and his comfort with all of these people, and that was, if he were here today, he would say that is because of lab school. His success has been because of lab school. Not everybody is going to work in a 300-person class, and I'd like to repeat that the lab school isn't just one grade and one grade and one grade and one grade. It's a community, and those seniors support those freshmen and help them grow. And everything that they do, I was surprised to hear that there were issues. I thought it was just enrollment. But there isn't anything wrong with lab school. Lab school is frigging awesome, and I wish I had it when I was in school.
And then is there a Brody? Okay, thank you. We have a few extra minutes. Is there anybody else who did not sign up who would like to address the board? Okay, you wanna? If you could please state your name.
I'll be super brief. Okay, I know everybody's been here for a long time. First of all, I want to say it's wonderful that you've taken the time.
Can you tell us who you are?
Oh, Mark Hennessy, sorry. It's wonderful that you've taken the time to listen to all of us here tonight, and it really reflects a lot of how much we all have respect for you, and we appreciate that you're being thoughtful about this. A pause would really hurt this program. People have talked about why. I can tell you my experience with the lab school. I have 2 kids who went through lab school. One of them, finished lab school, graduated, went to RIT, got into engineering, is doing fantastic in life. That would have not been possible had he not been in the lab school experience. Another kid went through lab school, started off, difficulty with high school to begin with, learning, all that kind of stuff. Got through lab school, had the experience of growing, learning, becoming really enamored of what education could be, and that's what this program does for kids. She finished with lab school. She's getting out of college in 3 years, folks. That's the type of thing that this program can help children succeed at, understand the beauty of learning and how much it can impact your life. So I just ask, please don't do this pause. It will be the slow motion death of this program. And I absolutely appreciate the need to fix something as it's going on and how hard that can be. But it's really important for the upperclassmen and for the kids who are coming in, that they have that joint experience. And that's all I want to say, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Someone from that corner. I think I see somebody in a brown sweatshirt. Literally.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jack McLaughlin. As someone who's the oldest sibling of 4, I've had the distinct pleasure of watching my amazing, smart, and hardworking siblings grow up and experience the world. I've heard all about their educational experiences, both good and bad, throughout their many years going to school. Upon moving to Bethlehem a few years ago, something was immediately clear to me upon listening to my siblings' experiences. My sibling Jude has been enrolled in lab school for their freshman year. Never before in my life have I heard Jude express such positive educational experiences throughout their first year in lab school. Whenever I come home from college, I hear only positive things. As a student who struggles with ADHD and anxiety, Jude has found difficulties in traditional classroom settings. When they found lab school, it was clear that they had found their home in the form of a school. Not only does lab school allow for students who thrive in a non-traditional environment to excel, but it also provides an opportunity for excellent students to distinguish themselves when applying to colleges. Being in college now, as I'm sure you all know, considerable amount of research projects and papers, I can say without a doubt that if I was able to undergo this educational experience, I would have had a significant leg up going through my college education. When I heard the news that lab school was to be closing, I was shocked and appalled. The board talks about declining enrollment, but instead of shutting down this program, they should be supporting it and promoting it as much as they possibly can. Sorry, just one second. When you talk about low enrollment numbers, you forget that each student who applies for or attends lab school is an individual, unique student whose lived experience has led them to thrive in lab school. Instead of droning on about low numbers and how that impacts the program, you could be focusing on ways to promote the program, making sure people are informed about what it is, and simply doing a better job supporting the program. I would hope that your goal as a school board is to help facilitate the best education possible for all students. You shouldn't dismiss this supposedly low number of students just because it might be inconvenient to continue the program. It is abundantly clear from the turnout tonight and at past meetings that the so-called challenges expressed by the administration and board are not felt by the parents and students involved in lab school. I implore the superintendent and administration as a whole to put yourself in the shoes of these students who benefit from this program, and as well as the parents and siblings who tirelessly support them throughout their education. Thank you for your time and consideration.
In the pink?
Okay, so I'm also Jude's sibling, so I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record here, but they're up there. Hi all, my name is Leah, and I moved to this town at the beginning of my freshman year. When we first arrived, all I really knew about the school was that it was the best in the region, and I hoped to thrive here. I was the first of my siblings to get into the high school, and at my orientation, there was no mention of lab school. Towards the end of my freshman year, my guidance counselor presented the idea of joining lab school to me and my mom. However, he said that it was a group of kids who stay together throughout high school. My mom and I were obviously both against the proposal because I was a new student with few friends, and lab school seemed like an isolated group away from everyone else. My counselor didn't mention the different learning approach and thriving community that a struggling young person like me could have benefited from. However, the appeals are very different for my sibling Jude. Jude is a freshman at Bethlehem, and before lab school, they had no support or relationships with staff. While lab school was definitely not a good fit for me personally, my sibling shines in that program, and after seeing them struggle to find friends and community, it is hard to describe how relieving and satisfying that feels. Another feeling I cannot begin to describe was the heartbreak they faced when they received the news of the shutdown. They were devastated and panicking, and seeing someone you love experience that is hard to say the least. It is outrageous to say that this program is bad for students. I cannot imagine how Jude would do without this program, and I know certainly that would worsen their mental health. Their sociability in lab school compared to the general public school is outstanding, and it makes me feel more secure in both academic and mental future. If you love someone, you would never want them to struggle. Parents, siblings, friends, and other relatives close to Jude have seen the improvement they have made, and while I previously had no stake in the future of lab school, but I love my sibling, and because of that, I will fight the board decision for as long as possible, because I never want you to feel as alone as I did. The decision to keep lab school open was very smart, and I hope you keep your word to support students like Jude. Thank you.
I think Julia had a comment. That's okay.
Okay, so I would like to start by saying I can read a book multiple times, but I can't change the ending. But hopefully I can change your thinking by my continuing to speak. So kind of a little backstory. I've had anxiety all throughout middle school, and it really was worsened when people started bullying me for who I am. It really made me afraid to go to school and just like dreading every day. And but then I joined lab school. And in lab school, I know everybody, and I can come to anybody with my problems, and they'll be super supportive, and I won't be afraid. I'll just come to them. And I never have gotten that before, and it's honestly the best feeling ever. Especially when I was in 9th grade, I would get bullied by other people who weren't in lab school. They would be like, oh, why are you in lab school? Why are you in lab school? And this did make me want to like consider leaving, but I didn't. I pushed through, and it was just the best decision I've ever made, and I'm just so glad I did that to this day. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Tracy. I'm the parent of a lab school junior. And there's been a lot of discussion in the room tonight that I really appreciate. I believe one of the board members was talking about expertise, and I feel like there has been a death of expertise and its appreciation lately. But there's also been a conversation about trust, and I'm not sure that I can trust. I'm only speaking for myself, but I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. I don't know that I trust what I'm hearing. Why should I? Trust is relational and bidirectional, and it's taken us 3 meetings and so many attempts just to get some accurate data that has been shredded by your own board. The data does not support an enrollment case, and that was the first and most prominent case made, so why should we trust that the motivations are clear now and not based on some absent, out-of-the-room thing that we don't understand? I really, really want you to keep the 8th graders in this program, because that is the lifeblood, that scaffolding, that multi-level interaction. That is what creates this culture that everyone loves. And my junior won't have anyone to mentor if you do that. So that's all I came here to say. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Would you like to make a comment? Yes. Somebody, I see someone in a, sorry, I was pointing at someone in a green sweatshirt. And then,
And then 2 more, then we're at an hour?
And then we'll.
I'm just telling you, I'm okay either way.
Hello, my name is Allison Hill, and I am a lab school junior. I am in the class of 2025, and I wanted to give you guys kind of a student perspective where we've heard from a lot of teachers, community members, heard from the board themselves, and I'd like to say thank you first for letting me speak tonight. And I know it's late, we're tired, we want to go home. But I want to start with, I believe my freshman year, we started with about 24 to 29 students. And if I could further refine that, that would be 26 to 28 students, I believe. And before I started my freshman year, I was actually put in the lottery. I was put in the wait list. And over the summer between my 8th grade and 9th grade year, I was accepted into the program due to somebody dropping out. And that was probably the best news I have ever heard. And so my class was one of the few years where it was COVID, and there wasn't a great marketing strategy due to social distancing and everything. We got a video, and that wasn't very informative, and if I could change or influence the way that we market lab school, I would say we would go back to the home base parts. So moving away from that, because we've heard a lot from that tonight, as a senior next year, like many before me who
our alumni here tonight that I see. You, as a senior, you get an experience that is different. You are able to mentor students. You're able to have that kind of senior buddy where you help them research. You help them kind of play a role in lab school and like kind of showing them, leading them into the way. If you ask, I believe any one of my friends, my teachers, my mother just spoke before me, that I have developed like confidence, leadership skills. I have come out of my shell a lot. And between now and my freshman year, I don't think if you had asked me, I don't think I would probably be the person I am today without lab school. And I have really felt that cohort community overall feeling with lab school. I have built relationships with underclassmen, upperclassmen. I mean, I am friends with some of the freshmen, and I have some of them calling me or texting me for advice or help with their math homework at 5 o'clock at night. And and so, I mean, if you don't bring in the new rising freshmen and future classes, and you take a break, that will disrupt that kind of sense of community and bonding in that community. Thank you.
Can I see a show of hands of how many people still want to talk? We're at about an hour, so I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are people okay with
Yes, I
continuing
just
on?
would like a break after
Okay.
public comment, please.
Yes, please. I need one as well. All right. So, gray sweatshirt.
Do you want to move?
So,
Oh, yeah.
I think we technically
I move
need
to
it
extend the comment period.
for the next 5 people.
Sure.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Erin Dolan. I'm a doctor of education and a college professor. I could speak to you about what a pause could do academically to some of those students that would thrive in this program, but instead I'm going to speak to you as a parent of an 8th grader. My son also has some struggles academically, ADHD, anxiety. I was looking forward to this program for quite a few years now for him to be able to join and be a part of, because I know that it could lead or would lead to his academic success. He's struggled through middle school to find his place in the classroom, and lab school would do just that for him. It would help him find his place. I'm concerned about his ability to be successful in the general high school population and high school classes, and without lab school, you're not giving my son and every other 8th grader the opportunity to be a part of something that could be incredibly influential for them moving forward. I understand program review. I understand a lot about program changes, especially large ones, and I fully respect what the committee is about to do. I've been on many myself. But again, to second what one of the board members said, you don't stop programs while they're being reviewed. Right? And these kids are resilient. The speaker earlier, the 8th grader, I am so impressed, if you're still here, so impressed by you, because they did go through COVID, right? They've been resilient. They've seen the changes. And if they aren't allowed to start this, it's not like they'll be able to start in their sophomore year, right? My son wouldn't be available to have any lab school opportunities until his junior year. So I understand what you're hearing from the administration, but from a board perspective that gives policy to the administration, you need to consider the impact on these children, on 2 years of cohorts, not to mention the impact you hear on the upperclassmen and what it will do for their lab school experience not having a freshman class incoming. So I just implore you that you do, it really sounded like you guys had a decision already made in your discussions. I'm just being truthful. The way that all of your points of view were coming across did not seem like there was a lot of open space in there for you to hear what the community had to say tonight. But what you've done and how you've been so attentive during the community speeches has been impressive, and that's changed my viewpoint from what I saw earlier, and I want to thank you for that. It's a tough decision you have to make, but I think the community and the students and the parents have made it very clear what that decision needs to be, and that decision is no pause. Thank you.
And after Arthur, whoever's up in the back there.
Hi, Arthur Siegel, Julia's dad. It was said that it's unfair to 8th graders to bring them into a program that may change dramatically. And there was talk about making promises to 8th graders we can't keep. But what about the promises to current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders? What about the promises that they would have freshmen to mentor? What about the promises that they would have a full cohort? Pausing the program absolutely cuts at the heart of lab school. If there's a pause, there won't even be a cohort by the time the committee finishes its work. Without new blood, lab school shrivels and withers. The founders of lab school made a bold and brave decision to seek out and develop an innovative way to educate our children. They were bold and brave in their perseverance against naysayers and those who would scuttle the program. Bold and brave was the administration that supported it. And the parents and students who first enrolled in the program were also bold and brave in taking a chance on something new, reaping untold rewards as a result. Lab school currently stands on the edge of a precipice. Whether you see it this way or not, your vote tonight will determine whether lab school survives or becomes merely a footnote in the history of the district. It's not likely to get a second chance. It is critical to the viability of this program that there be an incoming freshman class and that lab school be able to continue without any sort of pause while the review committee does its work. I know that many of you have your doubts about the wisdom of this approach, and I get it. The future is always uncertain, and we all want to make the right choice. But now it's your chance to be bold and brave. It's your turn to take a chance on this program, on the parents and students who have fought so hard to save it, and on the students yet to come. It would be easy to defer to the judgment of the administration, easy simply to let things play out through committee. But you have the power to make a difference, and I would ask you to be bold and brave tonight by seizing that opportunity to do the right thing. Demonstrate to the children of this district that this is a value worth embracing. The choice is entirely up to you. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Maya, and I graduated this program in 2016. First of all, I want to say I do agree that change can be beautiful and exciting. As lab school being an experimental program, it was born from change. It was born from a stab in the dark. However, I believe there are elements to lab school that should be preserved to the best of our abilities. There are experiences that simply cannot be recreated within the traditional school. I want to stress the field trips that lab school has to offer, as they are truly one-of-a-kind experiences. One of the sayings in my year was, "We go where the tourists don't." Lab school teaches its students to make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. It's one thing to write a pen pal in Spain or study Spanish from a book, a textbook, but it's another to fly out to Costa Rica and live firsthand up close with the locals and be immersed in their cultures and experiences. It's one thing to listen to a pen pal over the phone or a computer screen, but to have an in-person conversation with one of the locals is something that can't compare. There's a level of culture shock students in the traditional school will never experience, and I think this is so important for increasing cultural awareness and appreciation. I believe this leads to a more diverse and efficient workforce that, respectfully, any business would benefit from. Thank you.
Jonathan, I'm not sure who else is. Okay.
Tom as well.
Okay.
Jonathan Fishbein. I served on the board with some of you. I have a lot of respect for all of you. The chart of enrollment, quite frankly, is worthless without knowing the external factors such as the removal of electives, language, sudden change in coordinator, the student assembly, the parent assembly, removal of the 80 as mastery, and basically not selling the lab school. The bottom line is this. I agree with everyone that has said you take the 8th grade out, the 8th graders, a new 9th grade class, you're going to kill lab school. 2 years before we have 6 years before we have it full again. The issue of having a committee, to me, is a frustration. And it's frustration because the administration and this board should know what it takes right now to fix lab school. All cohort models of education, in order to have no scheduling issues, have to be self-contained. That's what lab school was when it was initially formed. It was self-contained. It had electives, it had language, it had everything you needed. It worked for 20 years. That's 3 minutes? You sure?
That's not? You just ran out the other person's time. I'm sorry about that. You can thank Maya. Keep going, keep going. Thank you for correcting me.
It's harder than
Apologies.
No worries. Bottom line is that we can fix lab school if we want to today. We put it back to its original model. You put in the electives, you put in the language, and you have teachers in there that want to be there. And that's what lab school was originally, and there are no scheduling issues. Scheduling issues go away if it's self-contained. You can do this now. You don't need a committee except to find out what else is out there in the world that we don't know that we might want to add or exchange with lab school. Lab school was creative, incredibly creative 30 years ago, but it was so far ahead of its time that it's only now that states and colleges are putting this program in to their education program. So don't give up on this. This is where the future is. We've been in the future for 30 years. You folks, the boards before you that put this in, they saw the future, and the future was lab school. Don't kill it, because no 8th grade class is, no incoming 9th grade class is going to kill this school. Thank you.
I called on her. Jonathan, I apologize again. Thank you.
No worries.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Abersold, and I'm going to start with the same way that I did last time I spoke, which is weird kid class of 2009. So I'm actually going to go back to our car analogy. I am a graphic designer, and every day I do the advertising for 21 dealerships and 8 manufacturers. And I can tell you that your ability to advertise successfully starts tier 1, which is the top. So what we need to be able to successfully advertise. And what is one strong way you do that? Testimonials. You have a ton of alumni willing to step up and say, hey, this is why lab school works. You have current students that step up and say, this is why lab school works. So it's not just the assemblies that need to be reinforced and happen more. It's conversations with alumni and having those alumni speak as well. And I have one more thing to say, and that's you either get it or you don't.
Hi, Tom White. Hard to follow my wife and my girls. But I wanted to add sort of one more thing that builds on what Jonathan was saying, which is that so I hear that a committee is needed. There's no reason that it needs to take 2 years to come up with its recommendations, or even 1 year. If you think about other industries, I work in healthcare. We have major crises that we have to address every month. We put a committee together, and within a week, 2 weeks max, we come up with something that is often transformative in terms of the way that we're running our hospital system, because we have to. I would recommend that you charge the committee with coming up with those answers quickly. I don't even think you need to wait a year on this, because you've got an impassioned community here who wants to help you figure out what needs to be done. And I would love for you to recommend that this committee come up with a recommendation in the next month and a half so that you can actually see whether it's viable to push forward with bringing in the 8th grade class the way everyone has been asking. And if that doesn't work, a year, but I think that you can put that challenge out there. I think that you will get all the support you need from the community to figure out what needs to be done to be able to come up with recommendations quickly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cindy Ables. I am the mom of a class of 2020 graduate. So I just have a couple of questions, and thank you for listening and really hearing everybody out. I think it's very important. The 2014 to 2016, I know that there was a committee, and then there was a drop. Do we know what the drop was? Does it correlate with the languages? And the electives being left out of lab school. I know that my daughter myself could not do a language and had to attend Hudson Valley Community College in order to finish her elective. So I'm kind of curious as to, from 2014 to 2016, I know Christine spoke to it, what did they actually come up with? What was reviewed? Was it curriculum? What are the answers from that situation? Because I'm really unfamiliar with it. The other thing is, in talking about selling and sales, so I have worked for many, many, many years in real estate, but it is retail real estate. One thing you never do is close a store while you're redoing it, because you lose brand recognition and you lose the identity. So you're taking away the face of the lab school if you are not continuing it. The best thing that you can do is keep it open or keep the name out there for people to understand it. And my fear is that if there's a pause, it's going to end up being a funeral. So a couple of other things that I really and I know that you might not be able to speak to them, but there are other issues. We don't know. We don't know how the teachers feel that are teaching it. I can only go from the years that my daughter was there. They do a lot of work. They put a lot in. I don't feel that there was a tremendous amount of support from the teachers union or from the board. I can only speak to the time that I was in there. I volunteered extensively. I chaperoned class trips. It was a lot. I also feel that in taking the trips away, the Costa Rica trip, the Florida trip, I think it put a different perspective on it. I was a chaperone on an 11-hour drive to Washington, D.C. I don't think that that's something that's in the interest of the kids. I think that it's something that needs to be brought back. It needs to be something that we volunteered and we fundraised for. And I think we just need to look at what's working now. There's a community. It's not only a community of the kids, but it's a community of family, and we all spoke about this. I have family friends that we made in lab school. We will continue to be friends. Our kids are friends, parents are friends. It's a whole community. It's not something that we felt growing up in the elementary or 8th grade or middle school, but I think it's something that everybody needs to address as well as families. All the families are in. Everybody's in. All the families are in. All the families are close together, and I think that's something that you have to understand as well, that it brings a community together. It's a very small community, and it's a great community, and the kids succeed. So thank you.
I think that was everybody who had raised their hand. Okay. Let's close public comment, and if we could take a 5-minute recess, please.
So what is this bag of candy?
Really?
It's March.
I know.
Okay.
Do you think it goes bad? Have you read the ingredients?
It's not stale yet, Kathy.
It's okay.
It's
We get another several years.
Twinkies, it'll last for a million years.
That's what I'm saying. Throw it in the freezer.
Start of our meeting again. The next item on our agenda, item C, is an action item, the Lab School Program Resolution. And I know that there is some language that is out there to amend it, but let's start by, I will read the recommended action that is recommended by the Board of Education with the following action items be approved. And it is following action item number 1 to be approved. So moved.
Yeah, second.
And you and I
Go
believe,
ahead.
I believe.
I was just wondering if we could take a moment for process.
Sure.
And just talk through. So we just moved to consider the resolution.
Right.
Correct.
So now there'd presumably be a discussion on the resolution, including whether or not to amend or some such, and at some point, someone will call for a vote? Like, can you just, like, literally remind us
So-
of the process, please?
We are, that the motion that this particular resolution has been moved. If somebody would like to move to amend the language, now would be the time to do that. Then we could discuss the amendment, vote on the amendment, and then based on whether or not the amendment passes or not, then we would have, hypothetically, say it's amended, we would then have an amended resolution. And then if somebody wanted to move again to amend it, we could do that again.
So you would consider each possible modification in turn, but any further modification could only replace the one that's already been like accepted. You can't have two separate motions, right? Let's say
I'm not following you.
Let's say
But at the end of the day, I mean, just think of it as sort of
right. So I move.
considering.
I move to modify the text. We discussed that with a vote on that modification.
Yes.
Then Willow wants to also modify the text, right?
Okay.
Hypothetically. You just basically start that whole process and iterate until you get to a point where there are no more proposed modifications.
Yes.
Okay.
And each proposal, to just say this out loud and make sure I got it right, each proposal would have to pass before it was then considered.
If they moved and seconded, and then you have a vote on that proposal, then we go to the next one.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Thank you for taking the moment, I appreciate that.
To be clear, though, if you move to amend.
Yes.
I think we can discuss potential changes of words
Oh,
to
yeah,
your
absolutely,
proposal.
yeah.
Okay.
At least I hope so.
Yes, yes.
We're doing this one word at a
I'm
time?
happy to expedite the process.
Only one word at a time?
Brittany, I call Exhibit 1.
So,
Well, hold on.
would you like to move to amend?
Yes, I would like to move to amend the current resolution.
Second.
There's some text over there. that-
Second? Okay.
Thank you. I don't know whether you want the text.
So,
No?
I
There you
know
go.
we sent it to Brittany ahead of time, so it
I
is
think
pulled up
that
there.
matches. I mean,
Would you like to speak to
yeah, a little.
why you would like
And thank
to
you.
do so?
A lot of this, we've had the history. I really appreciated a moment ago some of the discussion about the importance of the 8th graders, not just to themselves, but to the 12th, 11th, 10th graders. That hadn't been fully formed in my head, and so I think that makes actually my rationale for this stronger. We've heard pretty clearly there's no urgency to end it's like, we must stop lab school now, there's some terrible reason everyone has to leave. There's no pressing urgency to end the program. The biggest part of this, and the part I've been stressing for all along, is let's go get some data. Let's ask if the reason is enrollment, and you've heard me kind of critique the data presented. I don't think there's a case for that, but let's at least find out about the 8th graders, right? Let's go ask the 8th grade, are we really hearing that there are going to be 18, 20, 25? Are we in fact hearing there are going to be 6? Because that makes a huge difference in my mind as to whether you have a viable program going forward. If you've got classes of 6, I'm entirely on board with Jody. You don't have a program when you've got an incoming class of 6. If you've got a class of 15, you absolutely do. So the proposal has 2 parts, right? it recommends that we ask the current 8th graders. I would really like to see the assembly. I think, we've heard so many people talk about that. If you want to modify that more text to not micromanage so much, I'm open to that. But as written, right, it says that we'll have an assembly presentation from current lab school members as soon as possible, because time is ticking. And we'll offer them the opportunity and say, do you want to be part of this thing? It's pretty uncertain right now what it's going to look like in 2 years' time. But if that's for you, here's the opportunity to enroll. Second part says, while we do this, we're doing a program review. We don't stop the program. And so to give the best basis for improvements, for whatever change is needed, whatever the committee says, you've got to have that program running at the time. So during the program of this committee, I don't think it's going to be a month. I think that's a little overambitious, but whether it's 1 year or 2 years, that the current lab school program shall remain in operation. That's it. Discussion.
One comment I just want to make about this in general is I do think there's a level of micromanaging I see in the first paragraph about the assembly, and I think a member of the community made the point that if we as a board give the administration direction, we shouldn't be micromanaging and they should be respecting the direction. So that's my first point about that, and I'd like to.
I would happily accept a friendly amendment to delete and after an assembly presentation from current lab school members. That will not alter the core of this at all. That's fine.
Is the second number, is that redundant? Do you see that as redundant? In other words, isn't that accomplished by the first?
No, the first part says we've got to ask the 8th graders. The second part says while the committee is doing its work, we keep the program running.
But it says enroll on the first one, right?
Yes. I suppose technically the first part would keep it open for at least 1 more year. You're right, it would.
But to your point, you said let's go out, get the data. If it's whatever threshold we feel is too low, then it's not viable. But in your second paragraph, it says we're going to keep on going. So those are two things I think need.
So I would be totally, if the data say there are 6 people enrolled, I would fully expect to come back to the next board meeting or after we get those data and have someone move, actually, we need to pause this right now. And I would fully support that. But I think you've got to ask the 8th graders in the context of, look, there's a program for you. If you're here for this, then you get to have your voice. And if you say we want this, we keep it going.
And then next year, the 7th graders, you'd have to poll to see if they wanted to keep it going?
I think if you do this once, then you've got 2 years committee. You keep it going for the whole time. If you have established the class with saying, yes, we want to do this, you would take it in good faith. The 7th graders will have the same.
I know people are thinking a little further.
Yeah, as I said, the point about the cohort isn't just that 1 year, the cohort is 4 years. That actually really struck home with me. That made a difference.
If it paused, Jody, would it have to be 6 years before there was a full cohort again? When let's say it paused for the amount of time that is being suggested, why couldn't then, when it came back up, then just each class that didn't have it just could enroll then, right?
Potentially, yeah, depending on what the model looks like. That's saying 6 years is assuming the process is as it is now, when you're going to enroll one grade, the next grade, the next grade, and you're going to have 4 years of a cohort model, right? So, yeah, you could enroll. In fact, when lab school began, they enrolled more than one class at a time, just depending on how it's structured.
So your thinking is that if you paused for 2 years, let's say, at the end of that, you'd then try to go out and enroll a 9th, 10th, and 11th grade incoming class altogether.
Well, you could, and my understanding is that for some amount of years at least, they did the ninth grade didn't have a cohort. And so it was always kids coming out of ninth grade and into 10th grade that were being enrolled. So this would add a year to that, yes, that would be an extra year that you would then enroll, I suppose, for that one year.
Yeah, you could enroll multiple grades in any given year.
And I mean, one thing that, to point out, a conversation that has had, and something that I've been, thinking through every side of this, every which way since Sunday, till Sunday and before and after Sunday. These are recommendations. This would be the board recommending action to the administration. So it would be, at that point, as with, at that point, it would be up to the administration to determine what to do with that recommendation.
The intent behind point 2 in particular is to say, keep this open. We the board are telling you, the administration, this is what we'd like to see happen.
I would just say that's not how I read it as written, and so I think if that was what you intended in your motion, that's potentially a different conversation.
Then we should discuss, because, this is my first school board motion, as it turns out. If you want the language to be, instead of it is further recommended, it would just say, during the period of this committee, do this. I'm happy with that too. But yes, the intent is very definitely to be an instruction.
Right, a directive.
Yeah.
Well, again, to my earlier point, though, we have then that conflict between your two paragraphs, because the first paragraph, you say you want to go out and just get data and see, and it might show that this isn't viable. And if that's the case, then the second paragraph is saying, even if it's not viable, we want it to continue. And we've already said that the current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders are continuing.
And I take that point and I see the conflict. So I want to achieve having the 8th graders given this opportunity to enroll in the knowledge there's a program to enroll in. Particularly, the current original motion says we'll ask them. And I think that just doesn't get you the data you need, right? I am very, as I tried to say, I am very open to the possibility that those data then come back and say, even when there was a program there to enroll in, people didn't. And that point number 2 needs to get modified. But I think you need that context of point number 2 to get the accurate data from point number 1, to have the confidence for the 8th graders that there's going to be a program there for them to take part in.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying then that it would be an additional action to not make number 2 contingent upon number 1 at this moment, but rather to go forth as though both were happening in fact. And then if the results of the actions undertaken in number 1,
we are able to reconsider, and I would expect us to do so.
I see.
My original reading of this was that you were asking for an amendment to say, let's assess the class of 2028's interest in enrolling. And maybe this is a different, something different, but assess their interest in enrolling with the understanding that the committee is reforming the lab school and that it may not be continuing, you know, like that number 2 is not necessarily what's going to be happening. It may be a different type of program that we're talking about. And so I see number 2 directing that the 8th graders continue with lab school as it is, when we've been saying we think there needs to be changes made to the lab school. We're forming this committee, we're recommending changes. So is that perhaps what you're suggesting?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So, definitely, I hope the 8th graders by now, should be aware and will certainly be made aware if we go into that, that lab school is likely in 2 years from now in flux, right? But there's a committee, we think it's going to take 2 years to get any recommendations brought forward, sent to curriculum council, implemented. So there's a strong possibility that 2 years from now, lab school will be different in some way from what you see today. If it turns out that committee has recommendations, that get implemented sooner than that, then I don't see point 2 as overriding that, right? Point 2 is just saying, keep lab school going. The current lab school program is whatever the lab school program is at the time. It's just saying, don't not have a lab school program. We're going to keep admitting 8th graders, we're going to keep admitting 7th graders, the program will exist. It's not intended at all to prevent the committee saying, we've identified a magic bullet and we do this in next month and everything will, I don't think that's going to happen sadly, but if they did, no, this wouldn't in any way prevent that.
Right.
Yeah, I guess particularly with respect to point 2, I don't quite, given that the 9th graders are continuing in the program, I'm not quite sure I see the necessity of that paragraph.
Wait, what?
The second point.
Yeah.
So
In-
we are continuing it, right? Because the 9th graders are in the program. We're continuing for the 9th graders.
The current 9th.
The current 9th graders.
Right, I see.
Okay, so
Ultimately, procedurally, we're voting on this language right now.
Correct.
And so to the extent that people have problems with this language, that, I guess are gonna have to be a separate motion. So, this is the language that exists.
this is Will's point, I thought. We can discuss this text.
We might as well just discuss it
Right.
and figure out if there's anything that we would like to change. Maybe perhaps some people would like to vote for this and some others wouldn't, but
Keeping
So-
it largely the same, like.
Right.
Right.
Taking out the assembly, fine, doesn't alter, I don't think, right, the core. Holly, to your point, right, the current lab school program admits students every year. That's the point of bullet 2, we keep admitting students.
Okay.
So substantively, it's gone from the original language, which was the board making a recommendation that the interest be assessed
Yeah.
with current 8th graders. That's the original intended language. What we're talking about, I think, is a directive instead of a recommendation that lab school remain open and unchanged, and that because it is open and unchanged, 8th graders be allowed to actively enroll into next year's class, right?
That's a perfectly fine way of thinking about it, yeah.
And if I understand, it's time-bound. Time-bound to the committee's.
Right, it certainly doesn't bind anybody to anything post the committee coming back and saying, we think this is the best way forward.
Right.
Yes, it has a sunset clause, I guess. Thank you for that phrasing, that's clear. So while this is up, I'm gonna adopt Meredith's recommendation, if I'm allowed to do that, and strike the thou shalt have an assembly language. If you want whatever language you put in for bullet 2.
Brittany, are you
make
able
it-
to just
Yep, there you go.
delete that from,
So after councillors, delete through members. There you go, thanks. And I don't know what language the board would like or we procedurally need to say, this is a directive, thou shall, but that's the intent of what bullet 2.
I think it would just be directs, right?
Yeah, I think it's the board directs in paragraph 1, and it has further directed that.
Okay, so Brittany, alter point, change that to directs, and then also put the board directs in place of it is further recommended.
Or further directed.
It's further, sure. It is further directed, it's fine. Thank you.
I guess the problem I have with paragraph 2 is that I think that's already part of what we've said. You know, we've said we want the ninth graders to be in the program. We want this to continue. We want them to be fully supported. And I feel like if I vote against this language, I'm saying I don't want that. I don't want it to continue. I don't want it to feel fully supported. When that's not the case.
Much as I'd like your vote for it, I don't think that's true at all, right? If you vote against this, the current status quo exists. The ninth graders would still be allowed to continue.
Right. So why are we voting on this if that's the status quo? And we do want the lab school to be fully supported.
Because the current lab school program to me means we admit 8th graders, then we admit the current 7th graders. We keep it going as is. We don't restrict it to current 9th graders and up.
So if we want, and thank you for raising this, because I think it's really important that however folks vote, we're
clear on what we're,
exactly. You could shift that to the current lab school, or the current lab school program shall continue to enroll incoming freshmen as the committee does its work, or something, better end of the sentence than that, but something along those lines. If it's the enrollment piece that you are getting at, or you could just tack that on if you want to say that it will remain in operation, be fully supported, and continue to enroll incoming classes.
Meredith, would it make things clearer if that bullet point 2 ends, during the period of this committee, the current lab school program shall continue to admit freshman classes of 2028 and 2029?
I think I like what Catherine was saying more than that.
Okay.
And I liked it when you were saying it, and now I can't remember what you're saying.
I said remain in operation, be fully supported,
And continue to
and
admit
continue to
freshman
enroll.
classes.
Yeah, and
I mean,
continue to
that's what it
enroll.
would be, and then, but then that's just, I mean, there's no time, there's no time restriction at all on that.
No, it's during the,
current committee's period of committee.
yes, that doesn't change the time-bound thing.
Right. So I think, Brittany, we're adding after supported. Actually, so after operation, insert comma, delete and.
Would be the redirection?
That last line, after the word operation,
Okay.
put a comma,
Mhm.
delete the word and. And then at the end, after supported, put a comma, and admit freshman classes. Does that address the?
I think that puts a very,
And that's regardless of the amount of interest from that next class.
Yeah. see.
As written, it currently is, right?
Right.
That's.
Right.
That would take another act of the board.
That's explicitly my intent, is to make it clear that the 8th graders will be surveyed under the current status of this lab school programs going forward.
And then the 8th graders next year.
Yes.
Would be opportunity to enroll, yeah.
But that goes back to my first point, which is that doesn't address our concern about enrollment numbers and what do we feel is too low to continue another class. And I don't want to put a specific number on that, but again, because I don't want to micromanage.
Right.
But as it's written here, we're telling the administration, you have to enroll a freshman class, even if it turns out, you know, we're saying we don't think that, you know, these low numbers are working, that they provide.
Right.
I'm just concerned, again, right now, we're telling them to enroll a freshman class
Yep.
when necessarily the numbers might not support that.
And you're correct, right? That's explicitly the intent.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be trying to, you know, do I pick 15? Do I pick 18? I don't want to try and insert a number here, but I'm confident that we can assess what the data tell us, right? And after we've got that enrollment decision, if the number's 5, it's easy. If the number's 50, to me, it's easy. If the number's 10 or 12, we may need to reconsider. But yes, I don't want to be putting 13 in here and then be coming back next month, well, the answer was 12. Do we still believe?
Right, and that's also not our expertise and not, you know, not our role to micromanage to that level.
So that's why there isn't a number in that. Yeah, exactly.
Understood, I don't want there to be a number in there, but that also makes it problematic that we're directing them to admit a freshman class when that may not be, there may not be enough enrollment for that to be a healthy number, and then we're in an awkward spot.
Well, I mean, that assumes that we're all abducted by aliens and cannot return to a board meeting to, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean that snarky. No, I'm sorry, hold on, wait, I'm sorry. I did not mean that with any snark whatsoever. It was my trying to be a little funny and say, like, it assumes that I think what Ewan is saying is like, if I'm hearing him correctly, is like, okay, this is that way around that, is a commitment to a review and to a future action if indeed there is, you know, if indeed the numbers show that,
Yeah.
demonstrate that this would not be a healthy or viable thing.
And so it seems like it's either that or it would be some sort of squishy language about a sufficient number to run a class. Although maybe that's not squishy. Maybe that's the type of direction that gets to your concern about maintaining the integrity of the experts, you know, figuring out what that right number is. So maybe that's not squishy. Maybe that's what's needed here. I don't know, but that's what I see, and I apologize. I meant zero snark in that.
We heard a bunch that I thought was nice about, you know, the community operating in good faith and the board operating. We got a petition of 600 people, and I'm willing to take on good faith the comments we heard about, we've already found 18 people from our small survey, but no one's lying to us, right? I have no reason to believe that. And if that's true, and we're taking those comments in good faith, then I don't expect there to be an issue to need to come back and reconsider this, right? But you know, Catherine's exactly correct. We only bind ourselves to the extent that we have a current intent. Yeah? Nothing in here is like, no future resolution shall ever be allowed to override this resolution unless we all dance or something. We can come back and reconsider if we need to, but this is where I'd like to see right now. Yeah.
I take your point, Catherine, about the language you suggested about sufficient number, because again, I don't consider us experts,
right,
educational experts, and I wouldn't want us to be directing anything like that. But once we do have a directive out there, though, I would say that there would have to be some sort of standard, you know.
Right.
Saying that that we are trusting also administration to use their expertise to determine what number would be appropriate. Because again, another thing we've also seen with the enrollment data is that there's a difference between application and how many people actually enroll. Because no matter what, there is a scheduling issue, and you can't necessarily get around that without the work of the committee, who we hope is going to be able to make some serious changes about scheduling. But we're talking about in September, it's very likely that we may have absolutely a good number of people who have been energized by this conversation, who are interested in this, but then the number come September may actually not be sufficient.
So-
And I just think that we do need to trust the administration to move forward with that in good faith and not have to keep on calling board meetings about, is 12 too few, is 14 too few?
Yeah, the only other way, and I'm not even saying I would support this, right? I'm just trying to creatively problem solve here. But the other way through that is a 1A, that is directs the being offered the opportunity to enroll in the lab school. 1A is that we call on the superintendent to report on the outcome of those efforts with a recommendation for, continuing a class in the next year or some such, or better language than that, but asking for a recommendation based on the numbers. We already know, well, that's a different thing. So, that could be an intermediate step into that. However, it openly contemplates and would then openly contradict number 2.
I'm also trying to be mindful of not making anybody's life more difficult, right? If you have language that says, come back in at the next meeting and make a recommendation, actually it makes it really hard for Jody and administration to have to come back and, then say, well, our judgment is that 11 was too few, but 12 wasn't, and I'm kind of willing to take some of the heat on, or the board should take some of the heat for that, of actually trying to make the decision here, I guess. I take your point on micromanaging, and I've said it 3 times, but if the answer is there are 6 kids, we're going to come back in a month, next board meeting, and say, okay, this didn't work. I don't have a better way forward than that. Yeah.
Right, but I don't want to keep on reading my point, but again, the numbers between interest and what's actually possible in September have proven to be, a big issue.
On the other hand, the recent years don't say that, right? Because if there were really fewer than 30 kids even applying, and then we're getting 24 enrolled, 25 enrolled, 27 enrolled, actually that hasn't been an issue. People have just been saying, no, if we're applying, we're sticking with this, we're staying in the program.
Except they don't, right? That's why we're here in the first place. That's where this started, is the attrition out of the program. And I'm arguing against myself at the moment, I recognize that, but.
Well, from 9th grade to 12th grade, that's a separate question, yes. People may drop out along the way, but.
So when we talk about what the appropriate number is, that's why we're in this conversation in the first place, is because there
I see
are less than 10
right
in grades where we've said, we don't want you to stop the program regardless, right? So we're.
So in other words, given the general rate of attrition, your starting number would have to be much higher than what you want your ending number to be, or what the ending number
30%
could
higher
be.
at least.
Right.
Right, based on the average. At least.
Which means if you want a final class of 40, you need at least 18 starting out, basically. Yes.
I support the program. I actually support enrolling another freshman class as well, but I am struggling to support a resolution that requires us to continue to come back and propose and modify resolutions anytime something happens within this program. I think it's just not the way that a board is meant to govern, and it's not the way the administration can do its job by having us approve every step of the process. So that's where I'm struggling with it as well.
Do I hear you correctly as saying that you think point 1 here is what you'd like to see, but you're less sure about point 2? Is that a correct rephrasing?
I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that we have the authority to direct against a pause. I think we have the authority to approve a closure of the program. But I struggle with having the authority to micromanage when the administration needs to take a year to restructure. But I'm also sympathetic to the point that's been made that you can restructure and reimagine while not stopping something. And we do that all the time in other parts of the world, and in other professions.
I think one of the differences in some other professions is that you don't have a committee that is made up of volunteers. So, for example, when I have served on many, or I should say been appointed to, voluntold to be on committees professionally, and because it is through, the committee is meeting. You are required to be there, and so it just it has like a little bit of a different feel to me, I think, than when you have, you're asking teachers to do more and volunteer for something.
Holly?
Go ahead.
You, and I guess my question to you is, it seems a little bit contradictory if we're saying to go forward with this resolution and then get feedback and recommendations from staff and administration, right? But then, like all of this recommendations that we've been provided, like I guess how are we then defining what's worthy feedback and recommendations and what's not? You know what I'm saying?
You're saying because the existing recommendation is to pause.
Right. But then we're saying we'll do all this other stuff, and then if the recommendation is again to pause, just trying to understand what supersedes one versus the other.
So, if this were passing, right, then the status quo would become, we will continue to admit freshman classes. And right now, there is no language about how big that freshman class would have to be.
Remember, then you're saying then if we get feedback from administration.
That's not part of the current.
That's however you're gonna reword it. That I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
Okay. So what
it sounds like what you're saying is that some of that is inferred. So I'm just trying to understand again the rationale in we don't believe this, but then we'll believe you afterwards. How do we distinguish between the two?
I guess there are two pieces to that in my head. I don't guarantee I fully articulate this properly. Part of it is, again, trying to listen in good faith on our part and take the community in good faith that things like an assembly are really important, that there really is interest in the 8th grade, and allow that to be evaluated, right? And that no one's going to be able to argue, I don't think, that they haven't heard there's a thing about lab school going on. We've been here for 26 hours at board meetings doing that. So I think that's the important piece. That's what's different from the current situation where none of these classes, none of their parents were ever told there might be an issue or might be a reason to pause, or you wouldn't have an 8th grade cohort to be the mentor of. And at least a lot of the feedback has been, hey, we didn't even know about lab school. We had to go find out for ourselves and kind of bully our counselor into recommending it and stuff. So I want to make sure that's not the case when we go out and check on the current 8th graders. That's the difference, I think.
But then I feel like then you're getting into the micromanaging piece of how do you then evaluate how those counselors are doing it, what they're doing, and I mean I feel like that's.
I'm trying to avoid doing that, right?
Willow's saying, I mean I feel that's kind of not really our lane to.
Right.
To do that, and then again we get that feedback. Again, whatever that feedback is, but if we like it or don't like it, you know what I'm saying? It just seems very gray and subjective versus trying to see how do we make that objective versus subjective, which is kind of how it seems to me right now.
If you wanted to make it objective, I guess the thing you would do is you'd put a number in there, right? You could do that. You could have a quantitative, if we get at least 18 8th graders expressing interest, that will be our threshold. That would be where you could make it more objective.
If I may, do I hear an aspect of this where you're where you're saying that the committee would, we would be weighing committee feedback differently because there's more community engagement in that process because it's a broader stakeholder group?
So it's a separate point, it's an excellent point, but yes.
Oh.
As we're admitting this, freshman class, we're also going to have a committee with stakeholders from all sides. And if the committee's first report back to the board is, guys, we've evaluated this and we need to put this on pause right now, then I think that would definitely be frankly a stronger signal and one that we'd have to very likely defer to. Yeah. But that was a separate issue from, are we making this quantitative and putting a number in there?
Oh, I was going back to what I thought I heard you were asking before, but I could be mistaken.
But I think your point is really good, that at least for the incoming current 8th grade class, there will then also be this committee, evaluating all the possibilities of what to do, what to change. And if their first conclusion is the pause is the right move, I frankly wouldn't expect argument really at that point.
But for that reason, why do we, then I'm still struggling with paragraph 2.
Right.
Because that's not taking into account any recommendations by anyone with expertise, any recommendations of the committee. So, and to be frank, paragraph 1 really reads to me like the original resolution, with, perhaps a little more language, but I think that we could perhaps discuss the original resolution. Well,
are you talking about the one on the agenda?
the one on the agenda is really your paragraph 1.
No. It's really not. The one on the agenda just says, we'll ask and assess some interest. It doesn't give them the opportunity to enroll. That's the problem.
It's also a recommendation as opposed to a directive.
I see.
That's the key difference.
Yes.
Yeah. I am perfectly happy to entertain considering these two as separate modifications if you so wish. That doesn't bother me at all.
Well, and I don't know if this helps or hurts, because I think Willow's point was well taken as well. That the paragraph 1 is 1 year. It's talking about current year.
Yes.
I don't know if that helps or makes it worse, but to point out the obvious.
Any further comments on whether, and to be clear, at this point, we would be voting on whether or not to amend the resolution as opposed to voting
on the resolution.
On the resolution itself.
Meredith, would you be happier considering these two paragraphs separately?
I do feel as though they are two separate points, and I have issues with two different ones.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure procedurally.
Well, that's actually pretty easy. We just effectively delete point 2 for now, and then in a second, I move again to add paragraph 2, and we can consider that as a whole separate thing.
Well, I think we would.
I think.
I think we should vote on this as it stands.
As it stands.
Cool.
And then if that does not pass, then we could vote on paragraph 1.
Paragraph 1 separately. Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there any additional discussion on this, or should we have a vote on Ewan's proposed amendment?
Which is the first paragraph.
Which is
No,
in
which is-
its
right now, it's a whole
entirety.
This
thing.
language right here.
Yes. So, all in favor of the amendment as proposed?
Aye.
All opposed to the amendment as proposed? Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions? So the amendment is currently proposed, does not
It's
pass.
failed, correct. I move that we consider paragraph 1 separate.
A second.
Yeah,
Just make some extra spaces there, scroll it down there. Any separate discussion simply on this piece?
Well, what I see from this is the 2 points which we, I think, stated before. The difference between this and the resolution as written is its directive, and it's blinking right now. And that it also directs to enroll.
Yep.
My concern with this is what I said before, which is it does not give any credence to the fact that there may not be sufficient interest to enroll a healthy class, and that is something that has been a real concern. It's a concern that we already have a very small 9th grade class moving forward. And I wouldn't feel comfortable passing something where we're directing the administration to enroll students with no deference to their expertise about what a healthy class would look like.
I hear your concern, I do. For me at least, I'm trying to weigh that against the weight of the subjective but real data we've been given on what might be the interest level in the current 8th grade class.
I mean, you could add, or for sake of discussion, at the end to facilitate scheduling, and then some words that sound better, but upon an assessment by the administration that the incoming class size would be
Is sufficient
or appropriate or something. I think if that would exert the authority of the board, should you believe we have it, to direct that there not be a pause while we do a program review, while honoring the fact that we are not the administration and that they do have to be the ones that make some assessment about whether or not a program is, or a class size is appropriate enough to sustain itself, right? I think that gives you both of those if I'm articulating myself past my bedtime.
I don't object to that if that's the way forward that folks want to go. That's fine. I don't see how it's much different than where we are, frankly. I mean, except it would add in an assessment piece, right? Because we would then be saying, go out with an offering, and if you feel like the class, so then we are, sorry, I'm talking myself out of that initial statement. So then at that point, we are giving the administration deference on what the appropriate class size is. And then allowing for deference within that lane, if you will, and saying that if you determine that this is an appropriate class size, then go forward. Yeah? Sorry, that was very long-winded.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
My sense of the board is that while it might not be what I would love to have, that's what will get support. I'm okay with that.
Does someone want to suggest language?
Exact wording, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you looking at me?
You're a wordsmith.
Do you want me to suggest something?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Keep this all as is, separate
Yeah.
sentence afterwards. The administration shall then assess whether enrollment is sufficient to support the program.
I would alter that a little bit. The administration would then assess whether enrollment is sufficient to, you guys run the program, I don't want to be so broad as run the program. I want to be narrower than that, because we're specifically talking about one class here. So the administration,
I mean, the
Take this
last stuff is sort of filler. So what it says, it directs the current 8th grade students to be offered the opportunity to enroll in a lab school program, subject to the administration's determination
there we go,
that the class.
The enrollment is sufficient.
Yes.
to support it.
Oh, just, I need to pause after sufficient.
Yeah.
All right.
After program.
Right, Brittany, go to program. Hit return a few times. Go back to program. Subject to the administration's, what was your wording, Bob?
Subject to the administration's determination.
That the class, that enrollment is sufficient.
Period.
Period. Yep. Then you want an apostrophe administrations, but you know, yeah.
We'll get there.
I guess I still ask the question, who's to determine if they agree with that information? I mean, again, I feel like we're still at the same very subjective gray area. We didn't agree with this one, so we're doing this. They make a determination, and if it's not what's agreed with, then where do we go from there?
Puts us back in the same,
What's that?
it's like we're in a circle.
Yeah.
Well, I would think with this language, we are saying we are okay with the administration using their best judgment after they've figured out what the interest is in the 8th grade class.
I'm just playing devil's advocate again.
Mhm.
Understood.
What if that's not the number that people like?
Well, I think
Then
by
there's
this,
And
we
I'm
are,
just cautious that we're setting a precedent, that if there's information that's given that we don't, then, you know, I'm concerned about a slippery slope. Because I think you could apply it to a lot of different things in the school. And again, I feel like we're contradicting when we want to accept the administration's recommendations and when we don't.
It does put them, I mean, it puts Jody et al. In the impossible position of, they made this determination.
Yeah.
We said, we hear you, but we disagree, and we're gonna direct you to do something else
And then make
based on
another-
your best judgment,
And then make another determination.
and make another determination.
But, sorry, before we kind of even dive into that, which is exactly what this is about, I wonder if we can agree on the language for this, move that this be the amendment that we are considering, and then vote on this, because what you're speaking to is whether or not you would vote on this amendment. So if the language is sufficient, then I would respectfully say okay, cool, let's move away from the sufficiency of the language and talk about the content of what we do or do not want to direct.
Agreed.
You would like to have.
Sounds like a call for a
I would like to have a
vote.
motion.
Yes.
What am I
You would like to
motioning?
move the
Call for
question.
vote or whatever.
Move
Call
the
question,
question.
there you go.
I would like to call the question. I would like to move that we consider this resolution for a vote.
That's already been moved. You're just
Okay.
calling, you're just calling
I'm
for the vote,
trying.
but I understand, yes.
I second that. Trying.
All right, so given the amended language that is up on the board right now, are you laughing at me?
No, I'm laughing at Jonathan
Okay.
shaking his head at me
Okay.
because it's 10:40 at night and I've lost all track of motions.
Motions. All in favor?
Of what?
Of this
And I am not alone.
Okay.
Of modifying the language
This is-
on the
you and
agenda
this
to
amended
replace it with this.
Okay, I'm not voting
You're not
for the
voting for
substance
it,
of
you're
this.
voting
Okay.
to change language.
You're voting on whether or not you would like
I
to
know.
amend the language of the resolution to this. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Any abstentions?
I think I accidentally abstained because I was still trying to wrap my brain around what we were voting on. Nay.
So that was.
What was the vote?
I'm not sure.
You're gonna need to take a record, I think.
Yeah. Yes. So all in favor, how about we raise our hands?
Okay.
All in favor
modifying the
of
language.
modifying, of amending the language to what is up on the board right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, no, got me.
And opposed?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're voting for whether we want that or we don't.
No.
We're voting for whether or not we want to amend the resolution so that it says
So
that.
it's no longer this, it's now that, and then we will vote on whether or not we want that. Right now, we're just subbing that out.
You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Opposed? Let's raise our hands. Let me know. Okay, so that carries. So the resolution is amended to that language that is up on the board. Before we discuss that, do we have any additional amendments, any motions to amend the resolution? Okay. So, now do we have any discussion on the substance of this resolution before we vote on it? Any comments people would like to make?
I'm going to acknowledge that it puts the administration in a position that is not ideal. But I think we got here after a sort of series of decisions or non-decisions that were not ideal. And I think that whether we're doing it well or not, everyone is well-intentioned to get us to a place where we're comfortable with the direction and the outcome. Not everyone at this table is going to be happy with it, and that's what happens when you find your way to the middle of something. I don't have a way to finish that thought.
That's okay. Other thoughts?
I mean, excuse me, I personally would want to continue enrolling students as we review the program. That said, what I said earlier, I stand by. I look to the administration and to the staff for expertise in developing and implementing programs. And if they're saying that what we have is not working, and they're not confident in continuing to enroll additional students in that program, then I take that at face value. And I do so with a super heavy heart, because it is not what I would choose to do. And I hear that it's not what large portions of the community are asking us to do. But while we've got, as I said before, everybody's got expertise in this conversation, and I respect that expertise. And we've got different types of expertise here, and I want to respect what folks are doing in their area of expertise. So that is why, with a heavy heart, I would not support this.
Can I ask Jody, is this resolution workable?
I think it, to be very honest, I think it puts staff in a very difficult position. when I said it's not fair to the eighth graders, I think that for our guidance counselors to go out and try and encourage kids to enroll in the program without knowing what the future is, without being able to answer a lot of questions that parents would have, with saying the class above you, it has 5 to 7 kids in it, which you know where I stand on that. I think it puts them in a very difficult position from a logistical standpoint. And when you look at the number of kids who apply versus the number of kids who actually enroll, the scheduling process isn't something that's resolved in a month. We don't finish scheduling until the summer. And what happened with the current ninth grade students last spring, when there were discussions about the low numbers there, I think in May or June it was up to 18 or 19. And by September, there were, I believe, 13 kids remaining. And looking at the attrition rates over the course of time, it's not surprising that there's very few kids going into 10th grade. That would be my concern with enrolling another class of 8th graders and trying to sell them a program that I think everyone here can say there are problems with. And I think that the committee can come up with some really great ideas in a cohort model that will work. But I think it's very problematic, this resolution, for not just me. I mean, obviously, I'm the voice of the staff, the teachers, the administrators, the supervisors, but I think it puts everyone in a very difficult position.
Well, and that was, part of my problem with micromanaging in assemblies and telling people how to sell this program, because I think if we did move forward with this, I think it would have to be a very honest assessment of where we're at, and telling potential people the current status and the fact that we have no answers of what it will look like next year. In terms of the scheduling and the fact that there are so many problems, and we often do see the attrition between application and actual enrollment, I think that's why I was trying to find some language in there that gives the administration the ability to determine what that number should be. And again, I don't think that it's our role to micromanage that number. We're not the experts. So I was trying to address this issue by adding that language in there.
I think I would echo all the things that you said, Catherine, and in particular that I think this is, it is a really hard decision because of the engagement from the community on this issue, which I've really appreciated. But one of the things that I keep coming back to, and I guess it ties in with your comment about what are you asking them to enroll in, is you're asking 8th graders to come into a program that you don't know what it's going to look like, and then they might have to leave it, which is the same reason I felt that it was important to keep the 9th graders in the program. Right. And like there's just a disconnect there for me that I'm having trouble moving past. And and I also look at what would happen to a new 9th grade class if in the current 9th grade class there's only 7 students and some of them leave. Right. which certainly could happen if you look at, you know, the attrition numbers. So I don't want to put the 8th graders in that position, and I struggle with putting our staff in the position of having to try to sell that and explain that to them. As, you know, as a parent, I just feel like that would be very hard to understand. So that's sort of where I'm stuck on this. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I just, my experience with the school is not without blemishes, but my overwhelming observation has been that the staff and the teachers and the counselors, act, in good faith every day to do what's best for the students. And to the extent that they're giving a recommendation, I think that recommendation has been in good faith. And until I, see something contrary, that's how I'm coming down.
And I want to add too, I mean, I do think, I really believe that if we are not enrolling a 9th grade class, that doesn't mean that it's the death of the program, the end of the program, because I really do trust in the process of doing the reevaluation. And I hold a secret hope that it will happen faster than we think. But I do have a trust in that process. Any additional comments? Did you have any more comments?
You call the question, Mike.
I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Okay. So with respect to the resolution that's been moved, that is currently up on the board, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay?
Nay.
So the motion does not carry. Next on the agenda, item 3 is our future meetings and events. On March 20th, we have our next regularly scheduled board meeting here at the high school, anticipating executive session at 6 and reconvening to open session at 7. And just as a reminder, that will be, John, that's the conclusion of our,
That's correct.
of our budget presentations. And then on April 10th, 2024 is the meeting following that. There is more of a break because we have the week off for the spring break. So instead of being the first Wednesday, it's the next one. And anticipating executive session at 6 and the regular board meeting reconvening at 7. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.